Have you ever felt a subtle shift in your day? A whisper of something different in your routine that you couldn't quite pinpoint? What if those tiny, almost imperceptible changes are reshaping your entire perception of reality? Join us for a unique 3-hour journey into the quiet alterations of everyday existence, designed to open your eyes to the magic hidden in the mundane. Let's start with first, the vanishing detail shift. You walk into a room you've known 1,000 times before. Every detail is familiar, every photo, every object, every crease in the furniture. Yet, when you glance back, something has changed. The book on the table is gone. A picture frame faces the wrong direction. A clock that should be ticking has stopped. It's a subtle fracture, a detail small enough to be dismissed, but unsettling enough to ripple through your mind. Did you misremember? Did you imagine it differently? Or did reality itself shift when you weren't looking? This is the vanishing detail shift, the haunting phenomenon where memory and reality begin to blur, and the certainty of what is real quietly collapses. It begins with the smallest inconsistencies. You place your keys on the counter, but moments later they're gone, discovered later in a drawer you swear you never opened. You recall a conversation with precise words, but when you repeat them, the other person insists they never spoke them. You look at an old photograph and feel certain something about it has changed, though you can't name what. Each moment is fleeting, easy to dismiss, yet the discomfort lingers. It feels as if the world is gaslighting you. But the betrayal comes not from outside. It comes from your own memory. Psychologists describe this as a collision point between attention, memory, and perception. The brain is not a perfect recording device. It edits, it compresses, it overwrites. When you look back and find something missing or altered, part of it may be your mind's own reconstruction glitching. But the emotional weight of the moment comes from the fact that it feels like the world itself has betrayed you. The certainty you once relied on dissolves. If you can't trust your own eyes, your own memory, then what can you trust? History and folklore are filled with echoes of this phenomenon. In ancient myths, travelers who wandered into enchanted forests often described objects shifting, pathways altering, familiar markers vanishing when they turned their backs. In modern times, people speak of the Mandela effect, memories shared by entire groups that contradict the recorded reality, like logos drawn differently, words spelled another way, or events remembered that history denies. The vanishing detail shift is the personal version of this, your own private Mandela effect, too small for anyone else to witness, but powerful enough to make you doubt yourself. The terror lies not in the object itself, but in the crack it creates in your perception. When the details shift, you begin to question, how much of my life has been built on fragile memory? How many truths are just approximations my brain filled in? How many moments have I already lost without realizing? It is a quiet horror, not loud like a nightmare, but creeping like fog through the foundation of reality. Examples linger in ordinary life. A woman swears she left her wedding ring on the dresser, only to find it later on the bathroom sink with no explanation. A man remembers a coworker wearing a bright tie in a meeting, yet no one else recalls it. A child insists a toy was red, though everyone else says it was always blue. In each case, the shift is small, but the emotional aftershock is massive. The detail is insignificant, but the fracture it creates in the mind is infinite, because the moment you realize memory can't be trusted, you lose the anchor that ties you to what is real. Science might explain it away as inattentional blindness, as false recall, as the natural gaps in how the brain stores and retrieves information. And perhaps that is true. But there is another, more unsettling possibility, that reality itself is unstable, flickering around us, rewriting itself in ways too subtle for most to notice. Perhaps the vanishing detail shift is not just memory faltering, but glimpses of a truth we are not meant to see, that the world is not fixed, but fluid, and sometimes the seams show. The danger of living through these moments is not the lost object or the altered detail, it is the erosion of certainty. Once you notice the shift, you can't stop noticing. Every detail becomes suspect. Every memory feels fragile. You begin to wonder if you are piecing together a life from fragments that were never stable to begin with. You carry a quiet paranoia, a sense that reality could dissolve at any moment, leaving you unsure of what has been and what has only been imagined. And yet, there is something strangely profound in this fracture. The vanishing detail shift forces you to see how much of reality is constructed not by the world, but by the mind interpreting it. It reveals that certainty is an illusion, that memory is a fragile script rewritten each time we recall it. And perhaps, in a haunting way, it invites us to accept that reality is not as rigid as we think, that the world can vanish and reappear in ways we may never fully understand. So, the next time you turn back and see a detail missing, a picture altered, a memory contradicted, pause. Don't dismiss it. Don't rush to explain it away. Sit with the fracture, because in that fleeting moment, you glimpse the instability of existence itself. You see the cracks in the mirror of reality. And whether it is your mind faltering or the universe shifting, one truth remains. Certainty is a comfort, not a guarantee. And once you've seen the detail vanish, you will never again look at the world as solid, as fixed, as unquestionable. You will always carry the shadow of the question. If this detail can disappear, what else might slip away unnoticed? The phantom name echo. You're walking through a crowded street, or maybe sitting quietly in a cafe when it happens. A stranger looks at you, their eyes settling on yours with a certainty that feels almost too direct, and they greet you, not by a casual hello, not by a vague nod, but by your name, a name you've never given them, a name they should not know. For a moment, the world stutters. You're left frozen, half smiling, half uneasy, because how could they possibly know? The sound of your name, spoken by someone who shouldn't have access to it, feels less like coincidence and more like a crack in the walls of reality. A glitch. An echo. Something leaking from one version of existence into another. Your name is not just a label, it is the anchor of identity. From the first time it was whispered into your ears as a child, it has carried weight. It is the word that pulls you out of the blur of anonymity. When a stranger uses it, uninvited and unearned, it pierces you deeper than any ordinary word. It creates a dissonance. Do they know me, or do they only think they know me? And in that dissonance, you begin to feel the edges of something uncanny, like two realities have brushed against each other, transferring information they shouldn't have shared. Psychologists might argue it's just chance, that you misheard, or that the stranger was calling out to someone else who happened to share your name. Statistically, it's not impossible. But the human mind doesn't experience it as statistics. It experiences it as rupture. Because in that instant, it feels less like coincidence and more like revelation. Like you've been caught in a script someone else is reading, and they've just read a line you didn't know was written. The phantom name echo lingers because it feels personal. Reality itself feels complicit in giving away your secret. Stories of this echo appear everywhere. Travelers who report hearing their full name whispered in foreign places where no one should know it. Strangers who stop someone in a crowd, confidently calling them by a childhood nickname no outsider could ever guess. Even digital encounters, anonymous chats where a stranger suddenly types your name, as though the firewall between lives has leaked. Each story carries the same unease, a brush with something that feels too intimate to be chance. The phantom name echo also raises haunting questions about memory and perception. What if the stranger didn't know you, but instead, reality itself glitched, lending them a piece of information they should never have possessed? What if the name you heard wasn't spoken aloud, but surfaced from your subconscious, a projection onto their lips? Or what if, in some parallel strand of existence, you and this stranger already knew each other, and for just one moment, their memory crossed into this reality? When your own identity is mirrored back by someone who shouldn't have access to it, the foundation of trust in your reality begins to shiver. Think about how different it feels from ordinary coincidence. If someone guesses your birthday, you can laugh it off. If they happen to like the same obscure band, it's charming. But when they know your name, your marker of selfhood, it cuts deeper. It feels almost invasive, as though reality has been hacked. The name doesn't just identify you, it validates your existence. And when it arrives from the wrong mouth, it feels like existence itself has betrayed you. The most unsettling part of the phantom name echo is what follows. Even after the moment passes, your mind replays it endlessly. You test explanations, coincidence, mishearing, mistaken identity, but none of them erase the unease. You walk away carrying the weight of being seen in a way you didn't consent to, touched by something that feels bigger than the moment itself. And late at night, when the memory returns, you can't help but wonder, did reality leak? Or did you? Because maybe your name is not only yours, Maybe it belongs to all the versions of you scattered across unseen layers of existence. And sometimes, when the veil between them thins, a stranger on the street becomes a messenger, delivering proof that you are not as hidden as you think. The color tilt illusion. You sit in your room and everything looks ordinary. The walls are the same, the furniture hasn't moved, the light source hasn't changed. And yet, something feels off. The air seems cooler, but only in the way the colors appear. The whites of the curtains seem tinged with blue, or maybe the yellow of the lamp feels just a little too golden. You blink, rub your eyes, but nothing explains it. The world around you has tilted its palette by a fraction of a degree, and the effect is unsettling precisely because it's so subtle. This is the color tilt illusion, a trick of perception that makes the familiar feel strange, the normal feel uncanny. Unlike dramatic optical illusions that scream for your attention, the color tilt works in whispers. It's the faintest alteration, like a filter applied so delicately you're not sure if it exists at all. The human brain is wired to detect patterns and constancy. Stability in color helps us interpret reality as fixed and reliable. When that stability shifts, even slightly, the mind doesn't always register it as a trick. Instead, it registers unease. You don't consciously think, the colors have changed. You just feel the discomfort of something being not quite right. Psychologists studying perception note that our sense of color is context-dependent. The brain doesn't just read wavelengths, it interprets them relative to surroundings, to shadows, to prior experience. That's why two identical shades can look different depending on their background. In the color tilt illusion, this relativity works against us. A barely perceptible shift in tone can make a whole room feel emotionally different, cooler, distant, almost clinical, or warmer, closer, almost suffocating. Your nervous system reacts before your conscious mind can explain why. Think of a hospital room painted in sterile white. If the light tilts ever so slightly toward blue, the room feels cold, impersonal, detached. But tilt it toward yellow, and suddenly the same space feels warmer, softer, almost nostalgic. Nothing in the physical room has changed, only your brain's interpretation of color temperature. And yet, that interpretation affects your emotions profoundly. This illusion creeps into daily life in unnoticed ways. You walk into your living room at dusk, and it feels gloomier than usual, as though the walls themselves darkened. Later, under the exact same lamp, it feels cozier, warmer, more inviting. You might blame your mood, but often it's the imperceptible way your brain is interpreting the interplay of light and color. Artists, cinematographers, and designers exploit this constantly. A scene bathed in faint blue feels tragic or eerie. A scene touched with amber feels romantic or safe. The tilt doesn't need to be dramatic. It only needs to be subtle enough that your subconscious absorbs the emotion before your conscious mind registers the shift. What makes the color tilt illusion so disorienting is that it highlights how fragile our perception really is. We like to believe that what we see is fixed, measurable, objective. But reality is filtered through the chemistry of the eye and the interpretation of the brain. Your truth about your environment, the warmth or coolness of the room, the neutrality of the walls, is never a constant fact. It is a negotiation, constantly revised by context, lighting, and expectation. And here lies the deeper unease. If something as simple as the tint of a room can alter your emotional state, what else in your perception is being quietly tilted without your awareness? How many of your certainties, about people, about memories, about reality itself, are just contextual illusions, accepted as truth because your mind prefers stability over doubt? The color tilt. Illusion isn't just about walls and light. It's a reminder that reality is not as stable as we think. Every shade we see is filtered, adjusted, translated by a brain trying to make sense of a shifting world. And sometimes, all it takes is the faintest tilt in color to make us feel like the ground beneath our senses has moved. The repeating stranger pattern. There's a moment that rattles the foundation of your reality. You're walking down a crowded street in a city you've never visited before, and in the sea of unfamiliar faces, there it is. A man, a woman, a stranger you're certain you've seen before. At first, you brush it off. Maybe they just resemble someone else. Maybe it's your memory playing tricks. But then, days later, hundreds of miles away, you see them again. Same face, same posture, same haunting familiarity. and now your mind won't let go. Is it coincidence or design? This is what some call the repeating stranger pattern. It's the unnerving phenomenon where the same unknown face seems to reappear across different places, across different moments, as though stitched into the fabric of your life. One sighting is nothing. 2 is strange. 3 feels impossible. And yet, once it begins, you can't stop scanning every crowd, every train, every cafe for the face that both shouldn't be there and yet is. Psychology offers one explanation. Our brains are wired for pattern recognition, sometimes to the point of paranoia. The human face is such a powerful trigger in memory that once you've noticed someone unusual, your mind locks on, searching for them again. Maybe you've simply confused them with a look-alike. Maybe your brain exaggerates similarities. But that rational explanation doesn't ease the chill of recognition when the stranger turns their head, meets your eyes, and it feels intentional. The darker interpretation is harder to shake. What if it isn't coincidence? What if the repeating stranger is there because they're meant to be? Stalkers operate this way, showing up in places you least expect, eroding your sense of safety until paranoia replaces peace. Intelligence operatives use the same tactic, shadowing a target subtly, never hiding but never confirming their presence. And in more unsettling accounts, people describe the stranger as almost supernatural, unaging, unchanged, appearing across decades like a glitch in the program of reality itself. History is littered with such stories. Travelers in the 19th century reported seeing the same silent man across different countries, watching but never speaking. Urban legends tell of a woman who saw the same passenger board her train every morning, no matter which line she chose, until she finally approached him, only for him to vanish when she blinked. Even modern-day accounts spill across forums. I keep seeing the same man in a hat. Different cities, different times. He just watches me. These tales blur the boundary between paranoia and possibility. The repeating stranger pattern preys on one of our deepest vulnerabilities, the fear that our lives are not as private, not as random, not as free as we believe. If the same stranger keeps reappearing, either the universe is smaller than we thought, or someone, or something, has chosen us as their focal point. And both possibilities are terrifying, because here's the twist. Whether it's coincidence or design, both erode your trust in reality. If it's coincidence, then chance itself can conjure illusions so sharp they fracture your sanity. If it's design, then your life isn't fully yours. Your steps are being shadowed by an unseen plan, a script you never agreed to. Either way, you begin to feel haunted, not just by the stranger's face, but by the suspicion that reality itself is in on it. And the longer it continues, the deeper the trap becomes. You start to anticipate them. Every corner, every crowd, every reflection in a cafe window could be them. Their presence becomes less about who they are and more about what they represent. That gnawing question of whether you are living in a coincidence-driven chaos or a carefully orchestrated pattern. The repeating stranger pattern doesn't just challenge your memory, it challenges your freedom. Because the moment you start seeing them everywhere, you are no longer walking through life. You are being followed, whether by your own mind or by something that refuses to reveal its purpose. And the scariest part is that you may never know which it is. The misaligned clock, glitch. Time is supposed to be the one thing we can trust. The steady tick of a second hand, the rhythm of hours carrying us forward, the promise that clocks are impartial witnesses to reality. But what happens when your watch doesn't agree? When you glance down and discover that 5 minutes have passed, but it feels like 30 seconds, or worse, half an hour, yet no one else seems to notice. This is the misaligned clock glitch, a quiet fracture in your perception of reality, where time itself bends and twists without explanation. It starts small, almost innocent. You check the clock on your wrist, and it says 7:02. You look away, maybe send a message, maybe take a sip of water. When you glance back, it says 7:11. 9 minutes, gone. But to you, it felt like 2. You ask a friend nearby, did time just fly? They shrug. For them, it was ordinary, linear, expected. But for you, something slipped. It's not just the numbers, it's the sense that reality's scaffolding is unstable. Psychologists might call it a disturbance of temporal perception. Time is not an absolute experience in the brain. It's constructed, filtered through attention, emotion, and memory. Moments of fear can feel elongated, while boredom collapses hours into dust. Yet the misaligned clock glitch feels different. This isn't just perception, it's measurement. A device designed to keep order suddenly rebels, confirming that your sense of strangeness has physical proof. Stories of this glitch crop up like whispers. A man swears he sat on a park bench for maybe a minute before checking his phone, only to find 20 had passed. A woman recalls waiting for a train that seemed to take forever. Her watch insisted only 2 minutes had gone by. Both questioned themselves. Was it fatigue, distraction, imagination? But the eerie part is the solitude. No one else notices. To everyone else, time ticks normally, relentlessly forward. Only you are caught in the slippage, isolated in a private distortion of reality. Philosophers and physicists have long debated whether time is something we move through, or something that moves through us. Einstein showed us that time bends with gravity, that it dilates with speed, that it is not the universal constant we once believed. Could these glitches be tiny ripples of that same instability intruding on our everyday lives? Or are they psychological fractures, hints that our brains, under certain conditions, lose sync with the external world? Think of memory as frames in a film reel. Most of the time, our brain stitches them together seamlessly, creating the illusion of smooth continuity. But what if a few frames are dropped? What if your consciousness skips, leaving a gap you can't explain? A missing strip of film that your watch, cold and mechanical, still recorded? To you, the moment never existed. To the world, it did. That is the terror of the misaligned clock glitch. Not that time is strange, but that you are the only one excluded from its agreement. On a deeper level, this glitch stirs a haunting question. How much of time is real, and how much is simply collective agreement? If everyone around you says 10 minutes passed, but your body swears it was 1, who decides the truth? What if time is not fixed but negotiated, like a story we tell each other to keep reality aligned? And if that story falters, if your watch betrays you, how do you know which rhythm of existence is real, theirs or yours? The misaligned clock glitch is not just a trick of perception. It is a reminder that even the most trusted systems can fracture, and when they do, you are left in an uncanny space where reality feels both solid and slippery, reliable yet unstable. Perhaps these are just accidents of mind. Or perhaps they are fissures, brief exposures to the machinery behind the illusion of time, glimpses of a truth we were never meant to notice. Because if time can slip for you alone, if minutes can vanish or multiply without explanation, then what else about reality is held together only by agreement? What else could fracture if you stared too closely? The forgotten familiar spot. You're walking through a street or a forest path, or maybe just wandering on a trip far from home, and suddenly, you stop. Because before you is a place you're certain you've never been. A building, a clearing, a bench by the river. Nothing extraordinary, nothing marked by grandeur. Yet, as you stand there, something deep inside stirs. A whisper of recognition, a memory without context. Your mind insists you know this place. You've been here before. You can almost feel the echo of past footsteps, almost see the ghost of your younger self moving through the scene. But no explanation comes. You can't place the when or the how. It's both foreign and familiar, like remembering a dream you're not sure you ever had. This is the forgotten familiar spot, a fracture in memory where the past and present overlap in ways that defy reason. Psychologists might describe this as a cousin of déjà vu, but it carries something heavier. Déjà vu is fleeting, a spark of familiarity in a moment you know is new. The forgotten familiar spot is slower, deeper. It doesn't just feel familiar, it feels remembered. It's not just a glitch in the brain's pattern recognition, but a wave of certainty that you've lived something here, that this place has imprinted itself on you before. And yet, no matter how long you search your mind, the context refuses to surface. You're left stranded in the tension between recognition and forgetting, between knowing and not knowing. The unsettling part is how physical it feels. Your body responds before your mind does. Your chest tightens, your breath slows, your skin prickles with the eerie calm of recognition. You might even feel emotions that make no sense. Nostalgia, sadness, joy, or dread, as if the place is stirring up ghosts of experiences you can't remember having. A cracked wall might feel like a long-lost friend. A broken fountain might fill you with grief you can't explain. The spot is not just familiar, it is personal, and the lack of explanation gnaws at you. Stories of these moments are scattered throughout history. Travelers writing in journals spoke of stumbling upon villages or ruins that filled them with a strange recognition, even though they had never been near them. Mystics interpreted it as the soul remembering a past life. Psychologists frame it as a trick of memory, fragments of places you've glimpsed unconsciously, on a television, in a book, or in the background of another memory, woven into the fabric of your mind, until, when you encounter a similar scene, it feels like homecoming. But whether mystical or scientific, the impact is the same, a sense of belonging to something you cannot name. Think of how disorienting this is. You've been taught to trust memory as your anchor, the way you navigate who you are and what you've lived. But the forgotten familiar spot fractures that trust. If you can feel so deeply about a place you've never seen, what does that say about the reliability of memory itself? If you can mourn for a corner of a street or smile at the sight of a wall without any logical connection, what else in your life might be remembered, not because it happened, but because your mind stitched it together from fragments? Yet, there's also something strangely comforting about these moments. To stumble upon a place that feels remembered without reason is to be reminded of how mysterious your own inner world really is. It suggests your mind is larger than the timeline you consciously live on. It hints that memory may not be a straight path, but a labyrinth with doors you haven't yet opened. Maybe those forgotten familiar spots are clues, whispers of connections between past, present, and even imagined futures. Maybe they are reminders that your identity is not bound only by what you can recall, but also by what lingers just out of reach. Examples unfold everywhere. Someone stands in a cafe abroad and suddenly knows exactly where the sugar packets are kept, though they have never been inside. Another person hikes to a cliff and feels certain they once stood there watching the horizon, even though no such trip exists in their memory. A child visits a distant town and starts crying at the sight of an alley, claiming they've been there before. Each story reveals the same fracture, the undeniable feeling of familiarity without the map of explanation. Science leans toward error, misfiled memories, unconscious exposure, the brain's love for pattern matching. But even if the forgotten familiar spot is only an error, it's an error with power. Because in that moment, you are forced to confront the possibility that your life is larger than the narrative you've written down. That your memory is not a perfect book, but a shifting text that writes itself beyond your awareness. The danger, of course, is obsession. Some who experience these moments spend years chasing explanations, hunting for proof of past lives, hidden traumas, or forgotten experiences. They scour maps, trace genealogies, or search for the origins of feelings they cannot explain. And while answers may never come, the obsession itself reveals something profound. How desperate we are for memory to be whole, how unsettled we feel when the past doesn't fit neatly into the present. But maybe the forgotten familiar spot is not a puzzle to be solved. Maybe it is an invitation. An invitation to accept that not all of life's experiences can be explained, that some memories exist in shadows, that the mind is more mysterious than any map we draw of it. To encounter a place that feels both unknown and known is to touch the mystery of existence itself. To realize that identity is not just what we recall, but also what we cannot. So, the next time you stumble upon a place that makes your chest ache with familiarity, don't rush to explain it away. Stand in it. Let it wash over you. Let yourself feel the strange recognition, the haunting nostalgia, the unplaceable emotion. Because in that fleeting, fractured moment, you are reminded of a truth both terrifying and beautiful. Not all of who you are can be remembered. Some parts of you live in places you've forgotten, or perhaps in places you've never truly been. And maybe that's the point, that life will always remain larger, stranger, and more mysterious than memory alone can hold. The unfamiliar familiar voice. You're in the middle of a conversation with someone you know well, a friend, a sibling, a partner. Their words are ordinary, their face unchanged. But then, for a fleeting moment, something in their voice shifts. The pitch tilts just slightly, the rhythm stutters into an unfamiliar beat, the cadence carries a tone that doesn't belong to them. And in that split second, your mind jolts. It feels as though you are speaking not to the person you know, but to a stranger wearing their skin. The room hasn't changed, the body in front of you hasn't changed, yet something primal inside whispers, "This is not them." This is the unfamiliar familiar voice, The power of this experience lies in how deeply we attune to voices. Long before we even recognize faces, we learn to recognize voices. A parent's soothing tone, a friend's laugh, the familiar rhythm of someone we love. It becomes etched into us like an invisible fingerprint. So, when that pattern is disrupted, when the music of their voice plays in a new and alien key, it strikes us at a level beyond logic. We don't just hear the difference, we feel it. A subtle chill runs through us because our instincts know. Voices are not supposed to slip like that. Psychologists might explain it as perception, your brain catching a quirk, a momentary slip in pitch or rhythm that it interprets as foreign. After all, the human voice is fluid, shaped by emotion, fatigue, distraction, but the eerie part is how your mind reacts. For a heartbeat, it does not say, they sound different. It says, this is not them. That leap, from a small change in sound to a complete rupture in identity, reveals how fragile our sense of recognition really is. Imagine a best friend laughing in a tone that doesn't sound like theirs at all. For an instant, it could be a stranger sitting across from you, or a partner answering with a sharpness and rhythm you've never heard, making you feel as though someone else borrowed their tongue. Even more unsettling are moments when the voice doesn't just sound different, but feels inhabited, as if another presence briefly spoke through them. You're left staring at someone you know intimately, while your gut screams you are, in fact, with someone else entirely. The unfamiliar familiar voice lingers because it is not just auditory, it's existential. If someone's voice, which you've trusted as a marker of identity, can betray you, what else can? How much of what we call recognition is really just fragile pattern matching? And if such patterns can shift so easily, how do we ever truly know we are with the same person from one moment to the next? This phenomenon has been whispered about in folklore as well. In some cultures, it was seen as a sign that a spirit had passed through someone, briefly altering their presence. In modern terms, it echoes the uncanny valley, where something is almost familiar, but not quite, and that tiny gap births dread. The uncanny doesn't arise from total difference. It arises from near-perfect sameness, corrupted by a hairline crack. And the most haunting part is the way memory magnifies it. Long after the moment passes, you replay it, hearing that strange pitch, that odd cadence again in your head. You look at your friend and wonder if it could happen again, if it was just a slip of sound or something deeper. A voice that no longer feels stable leaves you questioning the stability of everything else. Because voices are not just sounds, they are identities wrapped in breath. And when identity wavers, when someone you know suddenly feels unknown, it is as though reality itself misaligned for a second, showing you just how thin the threads of familiarity really are. The shadow that lingers. You turn your head, your hand, your body, and for an instant something lingers. A faint silhouette clings to the space you just left, as though your movement trailed behind you, delayed by the light itself. It's not a trick of imagination, not a ghost, not even fatigue. It's the uncanny moment when your eyes hold on to an image after it should have already vanished, a shadow that doesn't obey physics, a presence that refuses to leave. This is the shadow that lingers, an illusion born from the strange delay between what happens in reality and how long your brain takes to let go of what it has seen. What unsettles us most is that this shadow feels alive. When you wave your hand across your vision, the afterimage drags, clinging to the air like smoke. For a split second, reality appears doubled, the movement that happened and the movement that refuses to disappear. It's as though light itself is behind schedule, too slow to catch up, too stubborn to release its grip. And in that tiny delay, we glimpse something uncanny, the world, not as a seamless flow, but as a layered overlap of past and present. The science behind this lies in persistence of vision. The cells in your eyes, the rods and cones, don't shut off instantly when light changes. They hold on briefly to what they've registered. It's like the ghost of an image burning faintly into your sight before fading away. Movies and animations exploit this phenomenon. Each frame lingers just long enough for your brain to blend them together into fluid motion. Without this lingering, film would be nothing more than a rapid slideshow. But in daily life, when it happens without the structure of cinema, it unsettles us. It feels as if reality itself is stuttering, repeating, or doubling back on itself. Artists and illusionists have long played with this. Staring at a bright image too long, say, a candle's flame, leaves a shadowy afterimage when you look away. Sometimes the shape flips, the colors invert, creating an impression of something that shouldn't exist. Religious texts once described these lingering visions as spirits or omens because they seemed to appear even when the object was gone. Today we know they're retinal ghosts, light burned into your vision that refuses to let go. But knowing the science doesn't erase the unease, because when a shadow follows you even after you've stopped moving, it whispers a question. Are you seeing reality or the echo of it? Psychologically, this illusion strikes a deeper chord. Human beings crave clean transitions. When we close a door, we expect it to stay closed. When we move an object, we expect it to be gone from its place. But the lingering shadow breaks this trust. It reminds us that perception is not instant. Reality does not arrive in our minds the moment it happens. It filters through delays, distortions, and echoes. And in that gap, what we think we see might already be the past. Consider what this means on a larger scale. If our eyes hold onto a shadow after motion, how many of our memories work the same way? How many things we cling to are just after images of experiences long gone, ghosts of feelings that should have faded but refuse to leave? The shadow that lingers is not only an optical illusion, it is a metaphor for the way human beings hold on to pain, to joy, to faces no longer present, to voices that should have faded, to moments that replay long after they have passed. We are creatures of echoes, of persistence, of shadows that stay longer than they should. In the end, the shadow that lingers unsettles because it reveals how fragile our perception really is. We think of sight as immediate, flawless, trustworthy, but in truth it is a delay, a shadow of reality arriving fractionally too late. What you see is never the world as it is, but the world as it was, a fraction of a second behind. The illusion is not the shadow. The illusion is believing that your vision is instant, when in fact, it is always chasing what has already moved on. And that realization, that even light is late, that even truth arrives with a shadow, leaves us haunted. Because if what we see is never quite now, then maybe we are always living, just slightly, in the past. The sudden gravity shift. There are moments when reality itself seems to bend, if only for a breath. You're walking, standing, or even sitting still when suddenly your body feels foreign, heavier, as though invisible hands have pushed you deeper into the ground, or lighter, as though gravity has briefly loosened its grip. The sensation vanishes as quickly as it comes, leaving no trace but confusion. Was it your mind, your body, or did the very laws that bind you to Earth flicker for a fraction of a second? This fleeting experience is what some call the sudden gravity shift, a micro-distortion so brief and so subtle that most people dismiss it as imagination, until they feel it themselves. To understand why this feels so unnerving, you must realize how deeply gravity anchors not only your body, but your sense of reality itself. It's the one constant we trust without question. Fire burns, water wets, and gravity pulls. It is the unseen lawgiver holding every breath, every step, every heartbeat within its domain. So, when you feel that force shift, even for the smallest instant, it's as if the foundation of the universe has cracked open to show you its instability. For most, it passes in silence, a shrug, a fleeting, "that was weird." But for others, it lingers, haunting them with the suspicion that they brushed against the machinery of reality itself. Psychologists sometimes explain these moments as vertigo, low blood pressure, or neural misfires in the inner ear. And yes, those explanations are plausible. When the brain misinterprets signals from the body, we can feel as though we are falling, rising, or pressing harder into the earth. But these medical explanations only account for some cases. They do not explain the synchronicities where multiple people in the same place report feeling the same sudden weight, the same lightness, as though the very environment itself shifted. That is when the ordinary begins to fracture and the extraordinary bleeds through. Consider stories from athletes and astronauts. Runners describe feeling, for just a second, as though their stride carried them unnaturally far, as if gravity let go mid-step. Powerlifters have described sudden heaviness, a weight pressing down on them far beyond the iron in their hands, only to vanish with the next breath. Astronauts in orbit have reported micro-disturbances, tiny pulses in force, subtle enough to question, strong enough to unsettle. And then there are accounts that feel almost supernatural. hikers in remote places claiming they suddenly could not move, as if pinned by an unseen pressure, or the opposite, moments where they felt so weightless they feared they might lift off the ground. The sudden gravity shift is terrifying not because of its duration, but because of what it implies. If the pull of the Earth can flicker, even briefly, then the most reliable law of existence is negotiable. And if it is negotiable, then who or what renegotiates it? Is it physics itself, some hidden cosmic force brushing against us? Or is it that our perception, our consciousness, occasionally syncs with another layer of reality, where the constants of our world are not constant at all? There is another layer to this phenomenon, the psychological trap it creates. When you experience it, you may not tell anyone. Why? Because how do you explain to a friend, "I felt gravity glitch for a second," without sounding unstable? And yet, countless people carry these stories quietly, only to find them echoed online in whispers, forums, and obscure discussions, where strangers across the world confess the same. Sometimes I feel heavier, sometimes lighter. It passes, but it feels real. The silence surrounding these accounts deepens the mystery. How many have felt it, but never spoken? The emotional effect of such a moment can be profound. Imagine walking into a room filled with people, and suddenly your body feels like it's sinking, while everyone else moves normally, unaffected. You glance around, no earthquake, no dizziness, nothing explainable. For the rest of the day, you question not only yourself, but the solidity of the ground beneath your feet. Did reality bend only for you? Or are you tuned, however briefly, to some hidden fluctuation others cannot feel? Science offers partial answers in the realm of microgravity fluctuations, tectonic shifts, or even changes in air pressure that can subtly influence balance and perception. But none of these answers fully account for the intimate immediacy of the sensation, the personal certainty that, for one breath, the rules changed. Skeptics call it a neurological hiccup. Mystics call it a glimpse of higher planes. Both agree on one point: it leaves you shaken. And perhaps that is the deeper point of the sudden gravity shift. It reminds you that stability itself is fragile, that the constants you rely on without question might not be constants at all. It whispers that the universe is not a machine, but a living enigma, capable of flexing and pulsing in ways that defy our understanding. It humbles you, showing that even the ground beneath your feet is not guaranteed. For those who experience it, the memory lingers like a shadow. You catch yourself noticing subtle sensations you once ignored. Was that a step too light? Was that breath too heavy? You begin to suspect that reality is not seamless, but stitched, and sometimes the seams pull apart just enough for you to feel the weight, or the weightlessness, of another layer bleeding through. The sudden gravity shift is not a grand spectacle. It is not thunder cracking or mountains moving. It is a whisper from the universe, a fleeting reminder that the laws we trust are not as unbreakable as we believe. And in that single breath of heaviness or lightness, you glimpse a terrifying possibility, that we are not walking on firm ground at all, but on shifting rules, written in a language we may never fully decode. The doorframe displacement. You walk through a doorway and something is off. The room looks familiar, your living room, your office, the cafe you've been in 100 times before, but your body whispers that it isn't. The walls lean in at angles that shouldn't exist. The air feels thicker or thinner. The distance between the table and the chair is somehow wrong. Nothing is overtly changed, nothing obvious enough to point to, but you feel displaced, as though by crossing the threshold you slipped into a space that resembles your own, but is not quite it. This is the doorframe displacement, the glitch that hides in the act of walking from one place into another. At first, you dismiss it. Maybe you're tired, maybe your balance wavered, but the feeling lingers. The room feels stretched, elongated, designed by an unseen hand that doesn't follow human rules. The bookshelf is in the same spot, but it feels taller. The window is right where it always is, but it seems farther away, as though the geometry of the room stretched silently while you weren't looking. You blink, trying to force it back into alignment, but the sensation remains. Space itself has shifted. Neurologists have long studied the strange effects doorways have on the mind. There's the well-documented doorway effect, where walking through a threshold makes you forget why you entered a room. Scientists suggest it's because your brain treats doorways as boundaries, wiping the mental slate to prepare for new input. But the doorframe displacement goes further. It's not about memory, it's about reality itself. It's as if the doorway doesn't just reset your thoughts, but reshapes the space around you. Imagine walking into your kitchen. You've crossed that threshold thousands of times. But today when you enter, it feels as though the ceiling is half a foot lower. The floor seems to slope ever so slightly away from you. You can't prove it, you can't measure it, but your body insists on the shift. Your sense of orientation, the unconscious map your brain keeps of every room, tells you something has changed. The terrifying part is that no one else notices. To them, it's the same room as always. Only you feel that the angles no longer add up. Some describe it like stepping into a replica of their own life, a room built by something that studied the original but got the geometry just slightly wrong. Others say it feels like space has stretched itself, like someone pulled at the corners of reality while you walked through the frame. Psychologists might call it a disturbance of spatial perception, a misfiring of the brain's mapping systems. But the uncanny weight of the experience suggests something more. What if doorways are not just physical frames, but thresholds between layers of reality? Each room a slightly altered copy, each crossing a migration to a nearly identical world. Think of it as a shuffle in the cosmic deck. Every time you pass through a door, the system replaces your environment with a version so close you can't detect it. Except sometimes, a fraction of the disguise slips. You notice the ceiling bending wrong, the distance stretching too far, the air pressing down in a way it shouldn't. For a split second you realize you are not in the same place you were before. You are in a copy, and the true original might already be gone. The implications are unsettling. If the spaces we move through are not fixed, if they shift subtly every time we cross a threshold, then how can we be sure we have ever stayed in the same world at all? Perhaps every doorway is a migration, every frame a portal disguised as architecture. Most of the time, we ignore the dissonance, smoothing it over with rationalizations. But sometimes, for reasons we can't explain, the mask slips, and we feel the dislocation in our bones. The doorframe displacement is not dramatic. There is no cinematic tearing of space, no obvious portal opening. It is subtle, quiet, insidious. It unsettles not by what it shows, but by what it suggests. That space itself is unstable, that reality shifts with every step, and that the rooms we call home might only be imposters, stacked in an endless chain of almosts. And the haunting question remains, if every doorway shifts you into a slightly altered world, how many versions of your life have you already walked through without noticing? How many times have you left behind the original room, the original moment, the original you, never to return? The missing word silence. You're mid-conversation, speaking smoothly, words flowing like water. Then suddenly there's a break. You reach for a word you've used 1,000 times before, a word so ordinary it should come without effort. But it's gone. Your mouth opens, your mind searches, and all you find is silence. It's as if the word never existed, as if it has been erased not just from your memory, but from the very language itself. You stumble, you pause, you laugh awkwardly, and the conversation moves on. But something lingers, because deep down, you know that for a brief moment, the world lost a piece of itself inside your mind. This is the missing word, silence, a fracture in memory where language collapses and reality flickers. It feels like such a small thing, almost forgettable. Everyone blanks on words now and then, but the intensity of the absence is what unsettles you. It's not that the word is misplaced, it's that it feels as though it has been erased. You can picture its meaning, you can gesture toward it, you can feel its shape on your tongue, but the sound will not come. Your brain, so fluent in the script of language, suddenly leaves a blank space, a silence. And in that moment, you are confronted with how fragile the scaffolding of communication really is. Psychologists describe this as the tip of the tongue phenomenon, a retrieval failure in the brain's language system. But explanations don't capture the eerie weight of the experience, because when it happens, it doesn't feel like a glitch. It feels like a disappearance, as though you were standing at the edge of a canyon where a bridge once was, staring into emptiness that shouldn't exist. The word is not just forgotten, it is missing, gone from the lexicon of your mind, as if your reality was edited while you weren't looking. The missing word silence is not confined to casual conversation. It strikes in important moments, in speeches, in arguments, in confessions, when you need the word most. And the silence feels louder than anything else in the room. You feel exposed, as if the emptiness has revealed how fragile your grasp on expression really is. And maybe, in some quiet part of you, you wonder if it is not just memory failing, but reality itself shifting, testing what happens when one of the building blocks of language is suddenly removed. This experience echoes in culture and history. Ancient poets spoke of words carried away by the gods, moments where language betrayed them and silence swallowed meaning. Writers describe it as if the universe itself sometimes hides a word, daring us to remember it on our own. In the digital age, it feels even stranger, because we live surrounded by reminders, dictionaries, and instant references. Yet, when the missing word silence strikes, none of those tools matter. The absence feels internal, intimate, beyond repair, until your brain decides to return the word hours later, mocking you with its simplicity. What makes it haunting is not the word itself, but the crack it opens in your perception of self. Language is not just communication, it's identity. The words you know shape how you think, how you perceive the world, how you connect to others. So when a word vanishes, it feels as though a piece of your identity has slipped through the cracks. If I can lose one word, you think, how many more could disappear without me realizing? What else in my mind might be silently dissolving, unanchoring me from the reality I thought was fixed? Examples surface everywhere. A teacher mid-lecture suddenly freezes, unable to recall the simplest term. A lover stumbles while trying to say something tender, the absence hanging heavier than any mistake. A child looks at an object, knows its use, but cannot name it. Each instance is small, but each carries the same weight. The recognition that memory, language, and identity are not as permanent as we believe. Science offers comfort. These lapses are normal, often caused by interference in memory networks or temporary misfires between storage and retrieval. But the comfort feels thin, because when you're inside the silence, it doesn't feel normal. It feels like a reminder that your mind is not fully yours, that something as essential as a word, something that should be automatic, effortless, eternal, can vanish at any moment. And yet, there is also something profound about it. The missing word silence forces you to sit in the raw space beneath language, to recognize that words are symbols, not reality itself. That even without the word, you still hold the meaning, the image, the feeling. Maybe the silence is not just a void, but a reminder that thought exists before speech, that identity exists beyond vocabulary. Still, the experience lingers. Hours later, when the word finally returns, it arrives with both relief and unease. Relief that reality has stitched itself back together. Unease that it could happen again at any time. And once you've felt it, you know. The language you rely on is not permanent. It is fragile. It is stitched together by memory that frays. And sometimes, in the middle of a sentence, the thread breaks, and you are left staring into the quiet abyss of what can no longer be said. So, the next time you reach for a word and find only silence, pause. Don't rush to laugh it off. Notice the fracture. Notice how the absence feels like more than forgetting, how it feels like reality itself flickered. Because in that missing word silence, you glimpse the fragility of language, the instability of memory, the truth that even our most ordinary tools of thought are not guaranteed. And once you felt that silence, you'll never again take the simple act of finding words for granted. The mirror mood shift. You walk past a mirror, hardly noticing it first. Your mind is heavy, your face calm, or maybe smiling faintly. But then you glance and something feels wrong. The reflection doesn't quite agree with you. Its eyes linger too long. The mouth carries an expression you don't recognize. Maybe the corners dip when yours don't. Maybe it seems angrier, or sadder, or colder than the face you know you're wearing. For a fraction of a second, you're struck with the chilling thought. That's not me. Not just a distortion of glass, but an intent. Something on the other side observing, responding, wearing your skin, but not your soul. This is the mirror mood shift. The unease runs deeper than ordinary tricks of light. Mirrors have always been both familiar and unsettling. Tools of vanity, yes, but also symbols of the double, the twin, the shadow self. We trust them to confirm what we feel. If we smile, they should smile back. If we scowl, they should scowl too. That perfect synchronization is the pact between self and reflection. So when that pact is broken, even for an instant, it rattles the foundation of identity. Because if the reflection is not bound to you, then who or what is it bound to? Psychologists might say it's pareidolia, the brain inventing misalignments, misinterpreting minor delays between perception and recognition, or perhaps fatigue warps your focus, making the face in the mirror feel foreign. But explanations don't erase the visceral punch of it. For a second, it feels like the reflection is not mimicking you, but acting of its own accord. And in that moment, the mirror ceases to be a surface and becomes a window into a space where another version of you lives, one that doesn't always agree, one that might not even like you. Folklore across cultures has long warned of this. Legends of mirrors as portals to other realms, of reflections that can trap souls or reveal spirits, of doubles that leak malice into the world through glass. Ancient superstitions told people to cover mirrors after death so the departing soul wouldn't be snared inside. Modern horror thrives on the same intuition, a reflection that delays, that lingers, that smiles when you don't. The terror isn't in the mirror showing you, it's in the mirror showing something that isn't you. Think of the psychological impact. You go to the mirror expecting reassurance. You want it to confirm that you are who you think you are. But instead, it betrays you. It suggests that identity is not one solid thing, but fractured, unstable, shared. And suddenly you wonder, how long has that reflection been there? How many times has it copied you convincingly, only to slip when you weren't paying close attention? What if, behind the glass, it has its own moods, its own consciousness, its own hunger? The mirror mood shift lingers because it touches the core fear of being watched by something wearing your face. If the reflection doesn't belong to you, then maybe you don't belong fully to yourself. Maybe there is a version of you that lives in parallel, resentful of always being forced to follow, waiting for a crack in the pact. And once you've felt it, once you've seen eyes that don't quite match your own, you'll never look into mirrors the same way again. Every glance will carry the faint suspicion that the other side is watching too closely, thinking thoughts that are not yours, feeling emotions you never consented to. The mirror is no longer passive, it has intent. And perhaps one day, it won't just watch, it will act. The looping street turn. You walk down a street you've never taken before. The air feels ordinary, the buildings familiar in their quiet sameness, and at first there's nothing to notice. You turn a corner, then another, following what feels like a logical path, expecting to eventually find something new. But instead, you arrive back at the same intersection you thought you had already left behind. The same cracked pavement, the same tilted streetlight, the same storefront with the peeling sign. You pause, unsettled, and try again. Left, then right, then left again. Yet somehow, impossibly, you end up back in the same place. No shortcuts, no hidden alleys. Just a gentle, impossible loop that defies the geometry of the real world. This is the looping street turn, a disorienting experience where space itself seems to bend around you, trapping you inside its pattern. At first, your mind resists the strangeness. You tell yourself you must have made a mistake. Perhaps you miscounted the turns, or maybe the streets simply resemble each other. But as you continue, the repetition grows undeniable. The same car parked in the same crooked angle, the same window with a dim lamp flickering, the same sound of a loose gutter rattling in the wind. You realize that you are not just lost. You are repeating. And that recognition gnaws at you, because the human brain craves order. We build maps in our heads as we move, creating mental geometry to guide us. When that geometry breaks, it isn't just disorientation, it's a kind of existential unease, the sense that reality itself is playing a trick. This looping phenomenon has been described in countless real experiences. Travelers in unfamiliar cities swear they've followed directions correctly, yet always circle back to the same landmark. Hikers in dense forests report walking for hours, only to emerge into the same clearing again and again. Drivers in rural towns tell stories of roads that seem to reset, intersections that defy logic, routes that swallow them into repetition. Skeptics call it poor navigation. But for those who experience it, the sensation is too sharp to dismiss. It doesn't feel like a mistake. It feels like a design, as though the streets themselves are conspiring to fold you inward. Psychologically, this experience ties to what scientists call cognitive mapping, the brain's way of constructing an internal model of space. Normally, this map is stable, but under stress, fatigue, or subtle environmental cues, it can distort. Similar-looking streets trick your recognition system. Landmarks blur together. The brain stitches fragments into a repeating pattern, even when the world itself is larger. The result is an illusion of looping, a sense that you're trapped in a cycle. Yet this explanation doesn't fully comfort, because the lived experience of the looping street turn feels more than confusion. It feels engineered, deliberate, like walking inside a maze designed to keep you captive. There are historical accounts that deepen the mystery. In old European villages, travelers often spoke of cursed roads that never let you pass, leading back again and again to the same square. Folklore told of fey tricks, where unseen hands bent paths so mortals could never escape their circle. In Japanese tales, spirits were said to confuse wanderers by shifting the geometry of rural lanes, ensuring they returned to the same shrine until they offered a prayer. Even modern urban legends carry echoes of this theme. Neighborhoods where outsiders swear they are led in circles, or alleys that fold time so you end up back where you began, no matter which way you walk. The deeper truth is unsettling. Space, as we perceive it, is never neutral. It is filtered through memory, emotion, and expectation. A looping street is not just about roads. It is about the terror of entrapment, the fear that you are moving but not progressing. That life itself is a cycle disguised as motion. In this way, the looping street turn becomes more than an urban oddity. It becomes a metaphor for existence. How many of us repeat the same choices, the same relationships, the same mistakes, believing each turn will lead somewhere new, only to end up at the same intersection of doubt? The streets may be physical, but the loop is psychological. And yet, the experience itself still lingers in real accounts. People swear by the unease, describing it not as confusion but as certainty, that they were meant to break free but could not, that the geometry betrayed them. That reality folded in a way no map could explain, and in those stories lies a chilling possibility. What if the looping street turn is not a failure of perception, but a glimpse into the fragility of space itself? What if geometry is not fixed, but malleable, bending just enough to trap us when we are most vulnerable? The looping street turn unsettles because it strips away our trust in movement. We walk expecting forward motion, expecting progress, expecting that each turn leads somewhere new. But the loop denies that. It makes us question whether escape is possible, whether reality has edges at all, or whether we are doomed to circle endlessly until we notice the pattern. In its subtle cruelty, it mirrors life itself. The illusion of choice, the repetition of paths, the haunting possibility that no matter how many corners we turn, we are destined to arrive back where we started. The sudden familiar stranger. You're walking through a crowd, lost in your own thoughts, when suddenly it happens. A stranger passes by. Someone you've never met, never spoken to, never seen before. And yet, in an instant, you're hit with a flood of recognition. Nostalgia washes over you like a memory you can't place, like the faint echo of a life you once lived. Their face feels familiar, their presence oddly comforting, as though they are someone you once knew deeply, someone whose absence has been carved into your soul for centuries. And then, just as quickly, they're gone, swallowed back into the crowd, leaving you unsettled, questioning whether you just brushed against coincidence or the remnants of another life. This is what some call the sudden familiar stranger, a phenomenon so eerie and intimate it cuts through the rational mind. It's not just déjà vu. Déjà vu is the sense that you've lived a moment before. This is deeper. It's as if your spirit recognizes a person your brain cannot name. For a second, you are split. One part of you knows they are a stranger. The other whispers, I know them. I've always known them. Science reaches for explanations. Our brains are wired to detect patterns in faces. Maybe this stranger shares features with someone from your past, an old friend, a forgotten classmate, a relative whose image lingers faintly in your memory. Neurologists argue that fragments of stored faces in your subconscious get projected onto strangers, tricking you into a false familiarity. But that explanation doesn't capture the emotional force of it, the sudden warmth, the pang of loss, the uncanny gravity pulling you toward them, even if you never speak. Consider the accounts of people who swear these encounters carry weight beyond psychology. One woman in London described seeing a man on the train who felt so achingly familiar that she nearly wept. She couldn't place him. Yet, his eyes, his smile, stirred a grief she couldn't explain. Another man recalled walking through an airport and locking eyes with a woman he was certain he had known for lifetimes. They exchanged no words, yet the connection felt ancient, undeniable, and it haunted him for years after. These are not just tricks of memory, they feel like ruptures in reality, as though lives, timelines, or souls have brushed together for a heartbeat before splitting apart again. Throughout history, different cultures have given names to this sensation. Mystics call it soul recognition, the idea that some bonds are timeless, that even after death, even after reincarnation, pieces of the soul seek each other out across lifetimes. In folklore, it is sometimes called the echo of a twin flame, the brief recognition of a bond that exists outside of time. And in psychology, it has been likened to cryptomnesia, the resurfacing of hidden memory. But even therapists admit the overwhelming nostalgia people describe often feels disproportionate to any logical cause. What makes the sudden familiar stranger so unsettling is not just the experience itself, but the questions it leaves behind. Why did this person trigger such a visceral reaction? Why do you feel as though you miss someone you've never met? And why does the encounter leave you with the strange ache of unfinished business, as though something was supposed to happen, but didn't? These moments also carry a darker undertone. What if it isn't simply a trick of the brain or a soulful reunion across lifetimes, but a glitch in the simulation of reality itself? Some theorists suggest that when you see a stranger who feels familiar, you've stumbled into a seam in the code, a moment where templates repeat, where consciousness brushes against an echo not meant to be noticed. The feeling of nostalgia may not come from another life at all, but from the subconscious realization that something is wrong, that the face you just passed was not supposed to repeat. And yet, even in the most rational analysis, the emotional truth remains. These strangers leave a mark. You think of them days later, weeks later, sometimes years later. You can still recall their face, their presence, the jolt of memory without a source. They are not just another passerby. They are a ghost of something you can't name, and your mind replays the moment, searching for meaning. The sudden familiar stranger shows us how fragile the boundaries of memory and identity really are. It reminds us that not all recognition comes from lived experience. Sometimes it comes from something older, deeper, hidden beneath the surface of ordinary life. Whether it's reincarnation, soul bonds, glitches in reality, or just the quirks of memory, the truth is the same. These encounters leave us haunted, because they make us feel that our story is far larger than we can comprehend. And perhaps that's why they happen, to remind us that strangers are not always strangers, that some faces are keys to doors we didn't know existed, that in the briefest of glances, we can feel connected to something vast, something ancient, something that refuses to be explained away. Because when a stranger feels familiar, even for a breath, it shakes the illusion that life is random. It whispers that the people who pass us are not accidents, but echoes. And every so often, the echo grows so loud that it breaks through, and for one fleeting instant we remember. Someone we should not know, but somehow do. The dream leak crossover. You wake up with fragments of a dream still clinging to you, a face you don't recognize, a word that repeated in your sleep, an object that seemed important though it made no sense. You shake it off, because that's what dreams are supposed to be. Shadows of thought, random noise stitched together by the sleeping mind. But then, in your waking day, it happens. The same word on a billboard, the same object sitting on a stranger's desk, the same face passing you on the street. And for one suspended moment, you freeze, because this is not coincidence you can easily explain. This is the dream leak crossover, when the boundaries between dream and waking reality slip, and fragments of the night spill into the day. It's easy to dismiss the strangeness at first. Maybe you tell yourself it's just your brain noticing patterns it would normally ignore. Psychologists call it selective attention, the way we see more of what we're already primed to notice. But the dream leak crossover feels deeper, more unnerving. This is not just your brain highlighting the familiar. This is the uncanny experience of something unreal birthing itself into reality, of imagination stepping off the stage of sleep and walking into your life. Consider the story of a woman who dreamed of a red umbrella lying abandoned on a staircase. In the dream, the color was striking, the detail sharp, though it meant nothing to her. The next morning, as she rushed to work, she froze on a subway stairwell. There it was, an identical red umbrella, folded and forgotten in the exact same position. She swore she had never seen it before, yet it was there, as if the dream had leaked into the world. She tried to laugh it off, but the unease stayed with her for years. Or think of the man who dreamed of a stranger with a crooked smile and a faded denim jacket. The face was clear, the jacket distinct, though he had no idea who this person was. Days later, standing in line for coffee, he looked up, and the man from his dream was in front of him. Same jacket, same smile. Their eyes met, and for a terrifying second, he wondered if the stranger recognized him too. He never spoke, but the encounter shattered his certainty that dreams were nothing but internal illusions. The phenomenon raises a disturbing question. Are dreams merely private hallucinations, or are they rehearsals, echoes, previews of things yet to come? Neuroscience tells us dreams are the byproduct of memory consolidation, the brain filing and reshaping experiences. But that explanation falters when the dream details don't belong to any past experience, when they appear wholly new, yet unfold before us in waking life. Some call it déjà rêve, already dreamed, the eerie counterpart to déjà vu, but the dream leak crossover feels stronger, as if the wall between two realities has been punctured and the contents of one seep into the other. What makes it more haunting is how personal the details feel. It's not vague impressions, but sharp fragments. A word you couldn't shake suddenly plastered across a newspaper headline. A symbol from your dream drawn in graffiti on a wall you've never walked past before. A song that scored your dream suddenly playing in a shop you stumble into. It's as though reality is mocking you, feeding back the dream in ways too specific to ignore, yet too slippery to prove. Some researchers argue this is the brain's pattern recognition gone into overdrive, stitching coincidences into stories. Others wonder if it hints at something larger, if dreams are not bound only to the mind, but tap into currents of possibility that run beneath waking life. What if dreams are not only memories shuffled, but timelines glimpsed? What if, in sleep, you brush against fragments of futures waiting to unfold, and the leak is the evidence left behind? The unsettling part is the solitude of the experience. When you tell someone, they shrug it off. To them, the umbrella is just an umbrella, the word just a word, the face just a stranger. No one else felt the echo, no one else saw the bleed-through. To everyone else, the world remains ordinary. But you know it shifted. You know the dream did not stay where it belonged. And once it happens, you can't stop wondering how much of your waking life is truly original. How many moments are fresh, and how many are recycled scenes, carried over from the landscapes of your dreams? How many details around you are not random, but imports, proof that the boundary between night and day is far thinner than you imagined? The dream leak crossover leaves you with an unshakable question. If dreams can spill into waking life, how much of what you call reality might already be a dream that leaked long ago? The memory swap flicker. You're sitting with someone, reminiscing. A moment from the past rises between you, sharp and vivid. You remember the smell, the laughter, the words spoken, but then they interrupt. They correct you. Their memory is just as certain, just as detailed, but it does not match yours. Maybe the event took place in a different location. Maybe the conversation went another way. Maybe someone else was there, or not there at all. You both insist on your versions, both feel the confidence of lived truth, and yet those truths cannot coexist. This is the memory swap flicker, the moment where reality splinters between two minds, leaving you to wonder whose memory is real and whether reality itself is as stable as you once believed. At first, it feels small. A disagreement about whether you ate at that restaurant in spring or summer, whether the movie you saw together was one or another. Harmless differences, easy to brush off. But the more detailed the memory becomes, the sharper the discomfort grows. Because you are not just casually recalling, you are certain, and so are they. The conviction in their voice mirrors your own, and that is the fracture. If both of you are utterly convinced, then one of you must be wrong. But how can certainty feel so much like truth if it can so easily contradict someone else's certainty? Psychologists tell us memory is not a fixed recording, but a reconstruction. Each time we recall, we rebuild, and in rebuilding, we alter. Over time, memory shifts to fit our emotions, our narratives, our sense of self. But when two conflicting memories collide in real time, the illusion of stability shatters. The brain whispers, "I know this happened." But reality responds, "Are you sure?" And the trust you once had in your own recollection weakens. The memory swap flicker is more than disagreement. It carries an eerie intimacy because it is shared. Alone, you could dismiss your memory lapse as your own failing, but when another person stands across from you, declaring the opposite with equal confidence, it feels as though reality itself has forked, as if two timelines have branched, and you are each remembering your version of the same event from parallel worlds. History and literature echo with these moments. Eyewitnesses to the same crime often tell radically different stories, each convinced of their accuracy. Families argue for decades about details of childhood events, with each sibling certain their memory is the right one. In courts, in politics, in relationships, reality splinters into competing recollections, and lives are shaped by whichever memory gains dominance. Truth becomes not what happened, but what survives collective agreement. Think of how fragile that is. Entire friendships can fracture over these disputes. Lovers can feel betrayed, not because of the event itself, but because their partner's memory erases or distorts their own. Parents and children can feel alienated when childhood recollections don't match. The memory swap flicker is not just about detail, it's about identity. Because our memories are not just stories we carry, they are the foundation of who we believe ourselves to be. So, when someone tells us, "That didn't happen the way you think," it feels like they are not just erasing the event, but erasing us. Science might soothe the wound by saying both memories are flawed, that perhaps neither of you recalls the moment correctly. But the unease remains because the conviction does not fade. The brain is not built to feel uncertainty about memory. It presents recollection as fact, which means two brains can present opposing facts at the same time, with no way to reconcile them. Reality flickers. You are left staring across at someone you trust, someone you love, and wondering, which of us is living in the lie? The danger of this flicker is not just mistrust of others, it is mistrust of yourself. If you can be so wrong while feeling so certain, what else in your life might be misremembered? What parts of your identity might be built on false recall? Did you really say those words, or did your mind invent them after the fact? Did that moment really shape you, or have you been carrying a phantom memory all along? The more you think, the less solid anything feels. Examples are endless. A group of friends argue about who told the first joke at a party, each certain it was them. A couple recalls their first meeting differently, one swearing it happened at a cafe, the other convinced it was at a library. A family debates whether a grandparent said something cruel or kind, with each side holding an unshakable version. These are not lies, they are truths lived differently, truths split across minds, and yet, perhaps there is something profound hidden in this fracture. Maybe memory swap flickers remind us that reality is not a single stream, but a tapestry woven from multiple threads, that the truth of an event is not locked in stone, but carried in the hearts of those who lived it. That certainty is not the same as accuracy, and that the stories we tell ourselves about our lives are not fixed, but fluid, shifting like light through water. So the next time you find yourself in the middle of a memory swap flicker, when your version collides with another's, don't dismiss it, and don't cling too tightly to winning. Instead, pause and notice the strangeness of it. Two people, one moment, two certainties. A fracture in the mirror of reality. Perhaps you will never know whose version is right, but maybe that is the point, that truth is not as rigid as we imagine, and that even memory, the anchor of identity, sometimes flickers. And in that flicker, you glimpse the unsettling, beautiful possibility that reality itself is more fragile than you ever knew. The word shift illusion. You sit down to read. Maybe it's a sign, a message on a screen, a sentence in a book. The words are clear, sharp, anchored. But when you look again, something shifts. A letter slides, a phrase bends. A word you were certain was there now looks different, almost rearranged. For a fleeting instant, it feels like reality itself is pliable, like language has betrayed its permanence. You blink, your focus sharpens, and it's back to normal, as if nothing ever changed. But the unease remains because you know you saw it. You know the letters did not hold still. And that is the essence of the word shift illusion. What makes it so unsettling is that it doesn't happen in dreams or hallucinations. It happens in the most ordinary, trusted of places, text. Language is one of the few constants we rely on to ground our thoughts. Words anchor meaning. They remain fixed, external, outside the chaos of our shifting emotions. But in these moments, the anchor loosens. The letters you trust to remain still start to slip, reminding you that perception itself is not absolute. It is fragile, fallible, fluid. Psychologically, the word shift illusion can be explained by how the brain processes reading. Our eyes don't move smoothly across text. They leap in saccades, stitching together fragments. Between blinks and tiny jumps, the mind fills in gaps, predicting words before they're fully registered. Most of the time, this process is invisible, but every so often, the illusion leaks through. Your brain predicts one arrangement, your eyes deliver another, and the result is a momentary fracture. Two realities of language overlapping. For a heartbeat, both are true. The word is both what you saw and what you see now, and in that overlap, the illusion blooms. It is not just a glitch of vision, it is a glitch of certainty, because the instant you notice the shift, you start to doubt. If I can't trust the letters in front of me, what else can I trust? The mind, desperate for stability, resets it quickly. The phrase returns to normal, the letters settle back. But deep down, you wonder, was it your eyes, your brain, or did the words themselves actually change, folding for just a moment into another alignment before correcting themselves? Examples of this illusion stretch across experience. Students poring over a line of text swear they saw a word spelled differently just a moment ago. A passerby glances at a billboard and blinks, convinced the slogan rearranged itself. Even in digital spaces, scrolling through a screen, people report that phrases seem to morph before their eyes, only to snap back as if mocking their certainty. And the more you try to catch it, the slipperier it becomes. Like trying to watch a shadow shift in real time, the illusion thrives in the periphery of awareness, where certainty is weakest. What makes the word shift illusion so haunting is how it speaks to the instability of perception itself. Reading feels mechanical, objective. You either see the letters or you don't. But these moments reveal that perception is not passive. It is an active construction, and constructions sometimes wobble. Reality, filtered through your senses, can flex in ways you never notice. Until suddenly, you do. And once you notice, you cannot unsee the fragility. Some philosophers suggest that these glitches are not mere errors, but hints. Hints that the reality we experience is layered, coded, mutable. Just as in dreams, text often refuses to stay still, perhaps the waking world occasionally reveals its seams too. A reminder that the solidity we take for granted is stitched together by attention, and attention itself is imperfect. You can call it neuroscience, or you can call it a glimpse behind the curtain, but either way, it leaves you unsettled. The emotional effect of the word shift illusion is profound because it violates trust. We trust words the way we trust clocks, street signs, names, anchors that keep the world stable. When words betray you, even for a second, it feels as though reality itself is conspiring to remind you of its instability. And what else might be shifting when you're not looking? If letters can rearrange themselves between blinks, what about memories, faces, events? The illusion seeds doubt far beyond the page. It suggests that everything we perceive may be more fluid than we dare admit. Breaking it down scientifically does not erase the eerie quality. Yes, we can explain saccadic movements, prediction errors, perceptual resets, but science explains the mechanism. It cannot erase the feeling. That feeling of catching reality mid-glitch, of being the only witness to a small betrayal of order. It is that feeling, not the explanation, that lingers in your mind. Because the word shift illusion is more than a trick of sight. It is a haunting reminder that reality, language, and perception are not as solid as we pretend. Words you thought you could trust prove slippery. And once you've seen them shift, even for a moment, you carry the knowledge forever. Knowledge that the world you read may not always be the world that is. The gravity of silence. You're speaking, laughing, moving through the rhythm of an ordinary moment. And then, without warning, it hits. The sound fades. The air feels heavy. The chatter dies, the hum of movement stills, and a sudden silence presses down, thick and palpable, as though the room itself has inhaled and forgotten how to exhale. For a moment, you don't just hear the quiet, you feel it in your chest, in your skin, in the way time itself seems to hesitate. It's more than silence, it's gravity, a weight that descends without cause, pulling everyone into its center, forcing awareness onto the stillness that should not feel so alive. This is the gravity of silence, an experience that startles precisely because it feels as though reality itself has paused. At first, you wonder if it's coincidence. Conversations ebb and flow, people naturally stop speaking. Moments of quiet should be ordinary. And yet, this feels different. It isn't just absence of noise, it's presence of something heavier. It's the way the silence expands, stretching wider than it should, lingering longer than expected, making you hyper-aware of every small sound that breaks it. A cough feels thunderous. The creak of a chair sounds unnatural. Your own breathing seems intrusive, too loud in a space that demands reverence. In these moments, the quiet doesn't just surround you, it suffocates you. Psychologists describe this phenomenon in part as a shift in collective attention. When multiple people simultaneously pause, their stillness compounds. Each person senses the lack of sound, becomes more aware of it, and unconsciously reinforces it. The result is a silence that feels charged, electric, far denser than the ordinary absence of noise. But the effect goes deeper than explanation, because the silence doesn't just register, it alters perception. Time itself seems to slow, thickened by the lack of distraction. A second stretches into 3. A pause becomes a moment of suspension, where reality feels slightly detached from its flow. This uncanny weight of silence appears in cultural traditions across the world. In monasteries, monks embrace it as sacred, describing silence not as emptiness, but as a presence in itself. In literature, sudden silences are often written as omens, a foreshadowing of something unseen. Folklore from different cultures warns of dead airs, moments when the natural world halts and something passes unseen. And nearly everyone has felt it in their own life. A classroom where the chatter evaporates all at once. A family dinner where words suddenly die mid-sentence. A public space where a hush descends so thick it feels orchestrated. The unease comes from the interruption of flow. Human beings live within rhythm, sound, motion, conversation, create continuity. When that continuity breaks abruptly, the brain perceives it as unnatural, even threatening. It's the same reason sudden silences in the wilderness trigger alarm. Our ancestors knew that predators often silence their surroundings before striking. Silence, then, is not always absence. It can be signal, a warning embedded deep in our nervous system. When a room falls into stillness too heavy to explain, it awakens something primal in us, something that whispers, "Pay attention." But the gravity of silence is not always sinister. It can also feel profound, as though time has briefly lifted us out of ordinary motion to let us glimpse the raw texture of existence. In a moment of grief, silence can feel like the only honest language. In a moment of awe, silence binds people together more tightly than words ever could. Lovers share it when words are too small. Strangers feel it together when something unexplainable passes through a crowd. It is in these moments that silence feels less like emptiness and more like revelation. And yet, no matter the context, the gravity of silence unsettles because it reminds us that time is not as seamless as we believe, that there are fractures, pauses, gaps where the flow halts, and we are suspended in something outside our control. We move through life expecting sound to be the background, constant and predictable. When it falls away suddenly, when it descends with weight instead of absence, we glimpse the fragility of the world's rhythm. We are reminded that even reality itself breathes, and sometimes it holds its breath. The gravity of silence lingers because it's not just quiet. It is the presence of something unspoken, the weight of everything that fills the space when sound disappears. It is the reminder that silence itself has substance, and that in those suspended moments, we are standing inside a pause in time, waiting, breathless for the world to exhale again. The phantom call glitch. You're alone, and everything is quiet. Maybe you're washing dishes, scrolling on your phone, walking down an empty street, or drifting towards sleep. Then it happens. So clear, so sharp it cuts through your thoughts. You hear your name, spoken in a voice that feels real, familiar, undeniable. Sometimes it's a whisper. Sometimes it's as loud and crisp as someone standing right beside you. Your heart jolts, your head turns, your body reacts as though you are not alone, but no one is there. No footsteps, no presence, just silence swallowing the sound. This is the phantom call glitch, the chilling experience of hearing your name in an empty place, with no speaker to be found. For most, it's an isolated event. One moment of strangeness, brushed off as imagination or fatigue, but for others, it happens again and again, the same eerie clarity of a voice calling out from nowhere. What makes this so disturbing is not just the sound itself, it's the intimacy. Hearing your name means being recognized, being addressed. It's the sound of identity. And when it arrives from emptiness, it feels like something beyond the ordinary has reached into your life and tugged at your awareness. Science offers explanations, though none feel fully satisfying. Some psychologists point to auditory hallucinations, triggered by stress, exhaustion, or the brain's tendency to misinterpret random noise. A creak in the house, a gust of wind, the hum of machinery. Your brain may fill in the gap with the sound of your name, because your own name is one of the most deeply ingrained signals in your memory. Others explain it as a misfire in the auditory cortex, the brain echoing its own stored patterns in a way that tricks you into thinking it's external. But what unnerves people most is how specific it feels. It isn't random sound, it's your name. It's personal, targeted, intentional. Across cultures, the phantom call glitch takes on darker interpretations. In folklore, hearing your name when no one is there is sometimes seen as a bad omen, a spirit calling you, a death warning, or a test to see if you'll answer. In some traditions, you're told never to respond to such a call because answering it invites something in. People have described answering the call only to be flooded with a sense of dread, as though something unseen was waiting for acknowledgement. The fear is not just in the sound, it's in the possibility that you were never alone. There are countless real-world stories. A man walking home at night hears his mother's voice call his name from across the street, yet, when he checks, she's asleep at home. A woman in an office building hears her coworker call for her, but when she walks over, no one has spoken. Children often report hearing their names whispered just before sleep, so vividly that they sit up, expecting to see someone in the room. These accounts span continents, ages, and times, suggesting that whatever this glitch is, it's woven into the human experience. The phenomenon digs deep into psychology because it weaponizes familiarity. We are wired to respond instantly to our own name. It bypasses logic and speaks directly to instinct. That's why the phantom call glitch is so effective. It hijacks that recognition. You don't think about whether you heard it. You know you did. And yet, there is nothing there to validate it. That cognitive dissonance, the clash between certainty and emptiness, is what makes the moment linger like a shadow in your mind. Some interpret it not as malfunction, but as intrusion. What if the voice is not your brain, but something outside perception, brushing close enough to bleed into sound? A parallel version of you, a ripple in the simulation, a spirit trying to reach across the veil. If reality is a construct, then a phantom call might be evidence of a glitch in the code, something accidentally revealing the system's awareness of you. The call of your name becomes more than sound. It becomes a message. But a message from where and from whom? The phantom call glitch forces you into an ancient primal fear, the sense of being observed when you are alone. It is the auditory equivalent of seeing a shadow move at the edge of your vision. Even if science insists it's harmless, the moment you hear it, your body tells a different story. Your pulse quickens, your skin prickles, your breath pauses. And that reaction is its own kind of proof. Because if it were nothing, why would your entire body behave as though something had crossed the threshold of your world? And perhaps that's the greatest terror of all, that the universe is not silent, that something unseen knows your name, speaks it in stolen moments, and waits to see if you'll answer. The skewed angle reality. You walk into a room and something feels wrong. The table looks steady, yet your eyes swear it tilts slightly to the left. The picture frame hangs flush on the wall, but no matter how long you stare, the lines don't align. The bookshelf seems to lean forward, defying the perfect symmetry of the floor. You measure with your gaze, tilt your head, even try to adjust. But nothing changes. Objects rebel against architectural order, as though reality itself refuses to sit straight. This is the skewed angle reality, when the geometry of the world drifts into imperfection, subtle enough to dismiss yet undeniable once noticed. At first, you wonder if it's fatigue, a trick of your vision, maybe the effect of poor lighting. You blink, shift your perspective, walk to another corner, yet the angles remain skewed. The desk seems to lean just enough to make you uneasy. The doorframe, once trusted as the anchor of the room, now feels crooked, as though space itself has warped, and no matter how hard you try to realign your senses, you can't. The room insists on being bent. Architects design with precision. Our brains rely on right angles and symmetry to feel safe. We are creatures of order. The sight of balance soothes us. But the skewed angle reality is like a crack in the blueprint. It suggests that the structure around you has shifted by a fraction, barely visible, yet enough to erode your certainty that the world is stable. The uncanny power of this glitch is not in its magnitude, but in its subtlety. The objects don't collapse. They don't topple. They simply refuse to sit as they should, mocking your expectation of order. Consider the story of a man who returned home one evening to find his couch looking wrong. It was in the same position, against the same wall, but it seemed to lean as though the floor beneath had tilted. He called a friend to check, but the friend laughed and said it looked normal. Yet to him, every time he sat down, the skew was there, silent, nagging, undeniable. Weeks later, he couldn't enter the room without unease, as if the crookedness of the couch had infected the entire house. Or think of the woman who swore her kitchen counters had shifted overnight. She reached for a mug and felt like she was leaning uphill, though the surfaces appeared flat. She set a marble on the counter to test her perception, and it didn't roll. And yet, her body insisted the angle was wrong, as though gravity and architecture had fallen out of sync. To this day, she avoids that kitchen in the dark, afraid of what else she might notice when the world is quiet. Psychologists might explain this as a disturbance in spatial perception, our brains misinterpreting depth, light, and proportion. Neurologists link it to the way our vestibular system communicates with vision, creating illusions when balance and sight fall out of sync. But even science struggles to explain why the skew feels so real. Why does it linger in your memory like an encounter, not an error? Why does it feel less like a mistake of the brain, and more like a glimpse into a version of reality where geometry obeys rules we can't understand? Because here is the chilling possibility. What if these skewed angles are not illusions at all, but exposures? What if space itself is not as stable as we believe, and occasionally the mask slips? Perhaps the universe does not run on perfect right angles, but on shifting frames, elastic geometries bending just enough to remain unnoticed, until one day you notice. And once you see the rebellion of angles, you can't unsee it. The skewed angle reality leaves you questioning the foundations of your environment. If a room can tilt without tilting, if a frame can hang straight yet look bent, what does that say about the trustworthiness of perception? How much of order is real, and how much is simply agreement, our minds smoothing over a deeper, hidden chaos? And so, the haunting thought lingers. If reality can betray you at the smallest level of geometry, what else might already be bent, quietly, invisibly, beyond repair? The synced stranger steps. You're walking down a street lost in thought when you notice it. Another pair of footsteps. At first, they're background noise, blending with the hum of the world. But then, a strange realization creeps in. The rhythm matches yours exactly. Every step, every pause, every shift of weight. You quicken, and they quicken. You slow, and they slow. Even the sound of their breathing seems to echo yours. It's as if the stranger beside you, or behind you, or somewhere just out of sight, is tethered to your stride. The air thickens with unease, because this is no longer coincidence. This is the synced stranger steps, the eerie moment when someone else's rhythm fuses with yours, making you question whether you are walking freely or marching to something unseen. At first, it feels explainable. Humans are social mimics. We mirror the movements of those around us. Maybe they are unconsciously copying you, or maybe your body is syncing to theirs. But as the steps drag on, the tension builds. The synchronization lasts too long, feels too exact, too deliberate. You test it, slowing suddenly, skipping a beat, pausing mid-stride, and yet, somehow the rhythm returns. Their footsteps fall into place like shadows that refuse to separate. What unsettles you is not just the mimicry, but the intimacy of it. Walking is one of the most personal rhythms we have, as unique as a fingerprint. It carries your mood, your energy, your history, whether you drag your feet from exhaustion, spring forward with purpose, or linger with hesitation. To have someone's pace lock with yours is to feel as though they've reached inside you, stolen the cadence of your being, and are now wearing it as their own. And that intimacy with a stranger feels wrong, invasive, uncanny. History and folklore are littered with echoes of this phenomenon. In ancient tales, shadow walkers or mirrored spirits were said to stalk travelers, imitating their movements as omens of death or fate. Soldiers marching in perfect unison were admired for discipline, but also feared for the eerie uniformity that erased individuality. Even in modern psychology, studies of mimicry show how easily humans slip into each other's rhythms, often without noticing. But the synced stranger steps strike differently. They make the mirroring impossible to ignore. Examples surface in everyday life. A commuter notices the person behind them has matched their pace for 10 blocks straight. A jogger feels the runner beside them, inhaling and exhaling in the same beat, as though their lungs were shared. A child playing on the street realizes another child has copied every step, every hop, every pause, until the game feels less like play and more like possession. Each moment begins innocently but grows unsettling with every synchronized stride. Psychologists might explain it as entrainment, the natural tendency for rhythms to align, like pendulums swinging into sync, or crowds clapping until they converge on a single beat. But while the science explains the how, it doesn't touch the why. Why does it feel so unnerving when it happens? Why does a stranger's synchronized steps make us shiver as if something more is at work? Perhaps it's because in that moment, you lose a piece of autonomy. You are no longer moving freely. You are part of a pair, locked into a rhythm you did not choose. The unease deepens when you consider the symbolism. Life feels individual. We like to believe our paths, our choices, our steps are uniquely ours. But the synced stranger steps whisper another truth, that we may be less independent than we think. That invisible forces, psychological, social, maybe even cosmic, pull us into patterns, into mirrored rhythms, into dances we never agreed to. And once you notice it, you can't unhear it, the echo of your own footsteps belonging also to someone else. The danger of staying in that rhythm is subtle. You begin to anticipate them, adjusting unconsciously, as if the stranger is leading even while they follow. Your awareness narrows. The world fades, and all that exists is the sound of two people walking in one body's cadence. It feels like a tether, like fate pulling you into lockstep with someone you do not know and may never meet again. When they finally break away, turning down another path, the silence left behind feels hollow, as though part of you has been cut loose. But maybe there is something profound hidden in this disquiet. Perhaps these moments remind us of the invisible web that binds us, that even strangers, unknown and unnamed, can share a rhythm for a stretch of time, that our lives, though separate, are not as isolated as we pretend. In a way, the synced stranger steps are a glimpse of unity. Two bodies, two stories, two timelines briefly aligned, and yet, the fact that it feels eerie shows how fiercely we cling to individuality, how unnerving it is to feel our autonomy dissolve into someone else's beat. So, the next time you hear footsteps matching yours, resist the urge to dismiss it as coincidence. Listen, feel the weight of it. Notice how your body tenses at the loss of separation, how the air thickens with the presence of the echo. Because in that eerie synchronization, you glimpse something both terrifying and beautiful, that your rhythm is not yours alone, that the boundaries of self are more fragile than you think, and that sometimes, without warning, the world reminds you, in breath, in step, in silence, that your life is not walked entirely alone. The shifting scar memory. You run your fingers over your skin, tracing a line you've always known. A scar, familiar as your own name, etched there by some past accident or story you've carried for years. But today, something is wrong. The scar is there, yes, unchanged in shape, in length, in depth, but it's not where you remember it. You were certain it lived on the left. You could swear you've told people that. You've seen it in the mirror, felt it in the dark. And yet now, without question, it sits on the right. The permanence of the scar is undeniable, but its location has betrayed you. This is the shifting scar memory. Scars are supposed to be anchors. They are history carved into flesh, physical reminders of moments that cannot be undone. They tell stories your mind may forget, but your body cannot. And that's what makes this illusion so disturbing. The scar hasn't vanished, hasn't healed, hasn't faded. It has simply moved. A contradiction that should be impossible, yet feels irrefutably real in your memory. You don't question the scar's existence. You question your own certainty of it. Psychologists would call this a memory misattribution, a glitch in recall where details swap places, where the mind's archive is corrupted by reconstruction. Because memory isn't a photograph. It is rebuilt each time you access it, vulnerable to small edits, influenced by mirrors, by angles, by stories retold. Perhaps you always saw it in the mirror and mistook left for right. Perhaps your brain flipped the memory unconsciously, rewriting location, while preserving permanence. But knowing this doesn't erase the unease, because to you, it is not a guess, it is a fact. And when facts betray you, what else in memory can you trust? Think about how deeply this cuts into identity. A scar is not trivial, it is a landmark of self. Maybe it came from childhood, maybe from an accident, maybe from survival. You've built part of your story around it, and now, that story feels bent, as if the scar itself has slipped across timelines. You catch yourself wondering, did I move into a different version of reality, where the scar has always been here? Did I cross into a body that looks like mine but isn't? These thoughts come uninvited, but they arrive nonetheless because the illusion is too intimate to dismiss. Stories like this echo in the phenomenon of the Mandela effect, shared false memories that feel vividly real, groups of people remembering movie lines, logos, or events differently than recorded history shows. But while those are cultural, the shifting scar memory is personal. It's not a crowd misremembering, it's your body, your flesh, your history, and when your body contradicts your mind, you feel untethered, as though you're living in a reality that isn't entirely yours anymore. Examples ripple in ordinary life. Someone swears the birthmark on their arm was on the opposite side. Another insists the scar from a childhood fall was on their left knee, only to find it's always been on the right. For some, the experience is brushed away with a laugh, but for others, it lingers like a haunting, proof that memory, identity, and physical reality don't align as neatly as we pretend. The shifting scar memory unsettles because it undermines permanence itself. We believe scars are eternal, proof etched into the body. If even scars can betray us, then what anchors are left? And more disturbingly, if our mind insists it remembers correctly, but the body shows otherwise, then which version of reality do we trust? The one in memory or the one in flesh? Some might dismiss it as error, but there's another way to see it, as evidence of overlap between realities. Perhaps in one strand of existence, your scar really was on the other side, and somehow your mind carried the memory across when your body did not. The dissonance is the echo of that crossing, the leftover proof that you have not always belonged exactly here. Whether explained by neuroscience or by metaphysics, the effect is the same, a quiet fracture in certainty. You stare at your skin, touch the line, feel its permanence, and yet you can't shake the truth that it isn't where you thought it was. The scar hasn't moved, but something else has. Maybe memory, maybe perception, maybe reality itself. And once you've experienced it, you never look at scars the same way again. They are no longer just reminders of the past. They are reminders that even the most permanent marks can carry mysteries that defy explanation. The song that predicts. You sit there, mind drifting, maybe with a thought so private you haven't even spoken it aloud. The radio hums in the background, a playlist runs, or some song shuffles into your headphones. And suddenly the lyrics hit. Not just close, not just vaguely relatable, but exactly aligned with what you were just thinking, what you were just doing. You reach for a glass, and the singer croons about reaching. You think of someone you've been missing, and the next line is about loss. The song somehow is not just music anymore, it's prophecy, narrating your mind in real time. This is the song that predicts, an uncanny phenomenon where art feels less like expression and more like an oracle whispering your own thoughts back to you. At first, you laugh it off as coincidence. Music is universal. Lyrics are written to capture common experiences. Of course, sometimes they'll align, but what unsettles you is the precision of the timing. Not yesterday, not an hour later. This moment, right now. As if the song was waiting, listening, ready to strike with its line at the exact second your thought appeared. It feels impossible, as if the barrier between inner thought and external reality has thinned. You weren't searching for meaning, but meaning found you. This effect unsettles us because it collides with the illusion of randomness. Playlists are shuffled, radios are programmed, Songs are written years before you ever lived this moment. And yet, here it is. Perfect alignment. Psychologists call this phenomenon apophenia, the human tendency to perceive patterns in randomness. But in the intensity of the experience, it doesn't feel like projection. It feels intentional. The timing is too sharp, too clean, too eerily personal. The lyrics don't just describe your moment, they predict it, collapsing the line between memory and future. People have reported this across decades. A driver thinks about ending a relationship just as a song about letting go begins. A student, nervous before an exam, hears a lyric about facing the test. A mourner whispers a name in grief, only to hear it sung seconds later. Each instance burrows into memory because it feels like reality is responding to your thoughts. It's not just uncanny, it feels supernatural. Artists, knowingly or not, create songs that act as mirrors. Lyrics are written to capture emotions that repeat across human lives. Love, loss, doubt, hope. Because these themes are universal, they slip into alignment with countless moments. But when the alignment occurs in real time, the mirror becomes something else. It doesn't just reflect, it anticipates. And anticipation feels like prophecy. Cultural traditions have long given songs prophetic weight. In ancient Greece, poets were seen as vessels of divine truth, their verses considered inspired by gods. In shamanic rituals, chants and songs were believed to reveal hidden knowledge, guiding decisions, or foretelling danger. Even today, many describe songs appearing at the right moment as signs from the universe, as if music carries messages tailored for each listener. Rational minds argue coincidence, but the emotional gravity is undeniable. When the soundtrack of your life seems to know your thoughts, it's difficult not to wonder if something larger is speaking through it. The song that predicts also exposes the fragile boundary between inner and outer worlds. We like to believe our thoughts are private, sealed away in the brain. Yet when a song articulates them perfectly, at the exact moment they surface, it feels like exposure, as though the world is reading your mind, or your mind is leaking into the world. It blurs the question of authorship. Are you thinking the thought, or is the song placing it into you? And in that blur lies the unease. If a song can echo your mind at the perfect moment, maybe reality isn't random. Maybe it's scripted. Maybe you're not just living your life. You're following a score already written, waiting for the right lyric to surface. Or perhaps, in a stranger sense, your consciousness is bending art itself, pulling the right words from the chaos of sound, shaping reality to confirm your moment. Either way, the song becomes more than music. It becomes a message. The song that predicts unsettles because it reminds us how fragile the walls of reality really are. A lyric, written years ago, recorded in some distant studio, now meets you here, in this exact second, describing your private moment with impossible precision. Whether coincidence, psychology, or something stranger, it feels like prophecy. And in those uncanny seconds, you are left wondering, did the song anticipate you, or did you anticipate the song? The double-glance stranger. You're walking through a street, a mall, a station, anywhere with a flow of people, when you notice a stranger. Nothing unusual about them at first. Maybe the color of their coat. Maybe the way they glance at you. You keep walking, lose yourself in thought. Minutes later, you turn a corner, and there they are again. Same face, same posture, same presence. But something is different. Their clothes, their outfit. The details have shifted, as though reality reloaded them with a new skin. It doesn't feel like a coincidence. It feels like a failure, as if the world around you glitched and revealed that it cannot generate enough variety to keep the illusion seamless. This is the double-glance stranger, the unnerving moment when one face repeats in impossible ways, leaving you questioning the fabric of what you see. At first, you try to rationalize. Maybe it wasn't the same person. Maybe it was a trick of the eye. Maybe you're mistaken. But your memory insists otherwise. The face is identical, the recognition too sharp to ignore, and yet the details don't add up. Who changes an entire outfit in the span of a few minutes? Who moves in such a way that they appear exactly where you are again, with no time to have gone and returned? The encounter gnaws at you, not because it cannot be explained easily, but because it feels intentional, as though you were meant to notice. Psychologists sometimes attribute these moments to cognitive bias. Our brains are so attuned to facial recognition that once we lock onto a stranger's features, we see them everywhere. Add in the fallibility of memory, and you might believe you've seen the same person twice, when in fact it was two people with similarities. But this explanation falters when the details are too exact. The same scar, the same unique hairstyle, the same unmistakable eyes. In those moments, rationality bends under the weight of the impossible. Some interpret this glitch through the lens of simulation theory. If reality is a coded environment, then perhaps not every detail is infinite. Like a video game with limited character models, the world around us may recycle appearances. The double-glance stranger could be evidence of the system cutting corners, loading the same character twice, only slightly altered, hoping you won't notice. But you do. And once you see the repetition, the illusion thins. There are countless unsettling accounts. A man in Paris once described seeing a tall, red-haired stranger in a trench coat enter a cafe. Minutes later, walking blocks away, he saw the same man again, except now in jeans and a hoodie, glancing at him before vanishing into the crowd. A woman recalled being at an airport, spotting a man in a business suit waiting by her gate. 10 minutes later, she saw the same man. Same face, same posture, now dressed like a tourist in shorts and sandals, walking in the opposite direction. Each story shares the same haunting detail, the impossibility of transition. There was no time, no place for the change to occur. In folklore, such sightings were often seen as omens, the doppelganger, a spiritual twin, appearing in rapid sequence as a warning or a distortion of fate. In paranormal traditions, the same stranger in different appearances is said to be a shapeshifter, a being passing through the human world, leaving subtle clues of its presence. And in modern accounts, it is often framed as a glitch, proof that our reality is not infinite, but stitched together with repeating patterns that sometimes fail under observation. What makes the double-glance stranger so disturbing is not just the impossibility, it's the intimacy of recognition. When you catch the eyes of that repeated face, it feels almost like they know you've seen it, as though the illusion has cracked, and both of you are momentarily aware of the fracture. The second glance becomes heavier than the first, loaded with unspoken meaning. You weren't supposed to notice, you weren't supposed to catch the repeat, and yet, you did. The psychological aftermath can be just as haunting as the event itself. For days, you scan faces more closely, wondering if you'll see another repetition. You question whether memory is reliable, whether the world is stable, whether you can trust your own perception. And somewhere in the back of your mind lingers the most chilling thought. If reality can repeat faces within minutes, what else can it repeat? What else around you is recycled, blurred, pasted over to maintain the illusion of endless variety? The double-glance stranger is not just a curiosity, it is an existential crack. It makes you wonder if we are not living in an infinite world at all, but in a constructed one, where even the smallest details can betray the hand behind the curtain. And the moment you see it, you can never unsee it. You begin to wonder whether strangers around you are people at all, or just variations of the same loaded template, endlessly shuffled, occasionally glitched. Because once you witness the same face twice, in two impossible forms, the world stops feeling infinite. It starts feeling manufactured. And the terror is not only in the face you saw twice, but in the realization that you might not be able to trust any of the faces at all. The breathless gap. Second, you're moving through an ordinary moment, walking down the street, scrolling through your phone, sipping your coffee, when suddenly it happens. A pause. A gap. For one suspended second, your chest forgets to rise, your heart forgets to beat, your body forgets to continue. It is not like catching your breath after running, not like the stutter of anxiety. It is too clean, too precise, too exact. A single second, neatly carved out of time, when your own biology seems to stop. This is the breathless gap second, a glitch so intimate it feels like reality itself has skipped along with you. At first, you don't know how to name it. You inhale and realize the breath should have come sooner. You feel the echo of your heart, but no beat where one should have been. The moment is gone as quickly as it arrived, but it leaves behind a hollow awareness, like the silence after music cuts off. You wonder if anyone else felt it, if the world paused in unison, but no one around you stirs. Only you felt the missing second. Only your body was caught in the fracture. Doctors might call it benign, an ectopic heartbeat, a momentary misfire of breath. And yes, biology explains much. The body stumbles and rights itself thousands of times a day. But the breathless gap second feels different. It doesn't stumble. It pauses. A perfect cut, as though something pressed pause on your body and then pressed play again. It feels less like biology and more like editing. Consider the man who described walking into his kitchen when suddenly he felt a void in his chest. No inhale, no beat. Just absence. In that silence, he swore the refrigerator hum cut out too, as if the entire room muted with him. Then, as if nothing happened, sound and breath returned. He stood frozen, terrified to move, because for 1 second, he wasn't sure he had been alive at all. Or the woman who swore her heartbeat skipped exactly every few months. Never more, never less. Always the same sensation, a single missing second. No flutter, no panic, just absence. She began to wonder if it wasn't her heart failing, but the world itself. As if reality required occasional maintenance, shaving a second off her life to keep the machinery running. She didn't fear it. She came to see it as proof that she was catching glimpses of the system behind the illusion. Psychologists have studied how humans measure time internally. Our brains construct rhythm from breath, heartbeat, footsteps, the cycles of repetition that tell us we are moving forward. When that rhythm is interrupted, even briefly, the illusion of continuity falters. The breathless gap second is more than a bodily hiccup. It is the collapse of the metronome that convinces you reality is stable. And yet, the experience carries something stranger, almost sacred. Some describe it as stepping into a void. Others say it feels like dying for just a moment, slipping into nothingness and being pulled back. It unsettles because it is precise, too precise for chaos. A second removed like a clean slice from the film reel of existence. You are left wondering, did you miss a beat? Or did the universe skip? There is a theory whispered in forums and late-night conversations, that these moments are resets, that consciousness occasionally hiccups when the system behind reality corrects itself. The missing breath, the absent beat, is not a malfunction of the body, but a reminder that the world you inhabit is not seamless, that sometimes the code stutters and your biology carries the evidence. The haunting part is not the pause itself, but the silence it leaves. In that gap, you realize how fragile continuity is, how every second of breath and heartbeat is not guaranteed, but granted. And when the rhythm returns, when your chest rises again, when your heart resumes its drum, you are left changed. For 1 second, you did not exist in the way you thought you did. And so, the question lingers. Was it your body skipping time, or time itself skipping you? If 1 second can vanish so cleanly, how many others have already been taken without you noticing? How many gaps have already carved through your life, unseen, while you trusted the rhythm to carry you forward? The object swap subtlety. You step out of a room for just a moment. Nothing extraordinary. Just a pause to answer a call, fetch a drink, step into another space. And when you return, the air feels the same. The light is unchanged, but something unsettles you. The pen on the desk is no longer where you left it. The glass tilts at a slightly different angle. A chair is pulled back a fraction farther than before. The changes are so small they could be dismissed, almost invisible. But your body feels the fracture before your mind does. Something is off. Something is shifted. This is the object swap subtlety, the unnerving sense that your surroundings have been touched not by time or accident, but by another you, moving silently through your world. At first, you try to explain it away. Perhaps you set the pen down differently than you thought. Perhaps the glass slipped without you noticing. Perhaps your memory is misfiring, playing tricks on your perception. But the unease lingers because you are certain. You know how you left the room, you know where each object sat, and the difference is too exact to be coincidence. The displacement feels deliberate, intentional, as though another hand has ghosted through the space and left its signature not in grand changes, but in the tiniest of rearrangements. This subtlety is what makes it so haunting. If an object disappeared entirely, you could dismiss it as forgetfulness or theft. If a room was utterly transformed, you'd know the cause. But these shifts are too slight, too precise, like a whisper meant only for you. A pen rotated 30 degrees. A book shifted half an inch. A curtain drawn just an inch more to the side. Nothing that would matter to anyone else. but enough to make you question whether reality itself is being rewritten in increments too small to detect. Psychologists would call it inattentional blindness, the brain's failure to notice gradual or subtle changes. The classic change blindness experiments show people failing to register swapped objects in plain sight. But what science explains as blindness feels, in lived experience, like intrusion. Because when it happens to you, it doesn't feel like your brain overlooked something. It feels like reality changed when you weren't looking. The room you left is not the room you've returned to, and you are left suspended between certainty and doubt. History and myth are full of echoes of this sensation. In folklore, mischievous spirits were said to rearrange household items, not to steal, but to disturb, to remind humans that they were not alone. In some traditions, the smallest changes in an environment were considered signs of parallel worlds brushing against ours, moments where timelines overlapped and objects shifted slightly between them. In literature, the uncanny is often built on the smallest fractures, an object out of place, a detail misaligned, that send the mind spiraling. The object swap subtlety is not a grand haunting, it is a whisper from a hidden reality. Examples emerge everywhere. A student swears the notebook on their desk was closed, yet returns to find it open. A man leaves the kitchen with the mug near the sink and comes back to find it nudged to the edge. A woman leaves her bedroom with the pillow straight and returns to find it slightly slanted. Each change is minor enough to dismiss, but striking enough to haunt. And the question always returns: did I misremember, or did something else rearrange the world while I was gone? The unease deepens when you think of the implications. If objects can shift slightly without explanation, what does that say about the stability of the reality you inhabit? Is the world fixed, or is it constantly flickering, rewriting itself in ways so subtle you only occasionally notice? And what if, just maybe, those changes are not random, but deliberate? What if another version of you, another self from another timeline, is walking the same path, brushing against your life, leaving tiny ripples as proof of their passage? The danger of living with these moments is the erosion of trust in your surroundings. Once you notice an object shift, you start noticing everything. You question the angle of a picture frame, the placement of your keys, the tilt of a chair. You wonder if you're slowly losing your grip, or if you've glimpsed the edge of something larger, an unseen presence, a parallel self, a system of reality that is not as stable as you believed. The paranoia grows not from grand events, but from the smallest of details. And yet, perhaps there is something profound hidden in the unease. The object swap subtlety forces you to see how fragile your sense of continuity really is. You realize that certainty is not built on facts, but on patterns, the expectation that the world will remain as you left it. When those patterns break, even slightly, you are reminded that reality is not guaranteed, that it is a script constantly rewritten, and you are only ever catching glimpses of its editing. So the next time you return to a room and see the pen angled differently, the glass nudged, the chair shifted. Pause. Don't rush to dismiss it as nothing. Notice how it makes your chest tighten, how it forces your mind to stretch between memory and perception. Because in that subtle fracture, you glimpse the instability of the world you live in. Maybe it was your mind. Maybe it was chance. Or maybe it was another you, walking just a step ahead or behind, leaving reminders in the smallest of details that your world is not as solid as you think. The window glare distortion. You pause by the window, expecting the same view you've seen countless times before. The street, the trees, the distant skyline. But today, something feels wrong. The world outside doesn't simply look brighter or dimmer, it tilts into a new register of light, as though someone has slid an invisible dial behind the glass. Shadows bend, outlines glow too sharply, or fade too quickly. For a moment, it doesn't feel like you're looking at the same world. It feels like you've stepped into a different layer of it. The window glare distortion creeps in not as a flaw of vision, but as a subtle reminder. Reality's brightness isn't fixed. It can be adjusted, manipulated, reshaped, without your consent. At first, your mind scrambles for explanations. Maybe it's the glass itself, bending light through imperfections. Maybe it's your eyes, strained or tired, making the world shift in intensity. But the unease comes from the feeling that what you're seeing isn't just altered perception, but altered reality. The scene outside hasn't changed, yet its essence feels rewritten. It's as though the universe carries a hidden control panel, and for just a moment, you've caught it sliding the lever between worlds. Science can explain some of it. Windows polarize and filter light. Your pupils expand and contract, recalibrating brightness with each blink. Tiny shifts in glare, angle, or reflection can transform an ordinary scene into something uncanny. But these explanations don't touch the core of the experience. That sense that reality itself was remixed in front of you. Because it isn't just about brightness, it's about mood. The world outside doesn't just look different, it feels different, as if the tone of reality itself was edited like a photograph. Examples are everywhere once you start noticing. One day the world outside seems drenched in dreamlike brilliance, every detail sharpened, as though the day is too awake. The next, it feels muted, colors swallowed in a gray filter, the familiar scene turned somber. Some describe it as watching the world flip settings, like switching from one simulation mode to another. And the most unnerving part is how sudden it can be. A blink, a slight shift of angle, and the entire emotional weight of reality seems replaced. The window glare. Distortion unsettles because it forces you to question what real even looks like. If brightness, contrast, and tone can shift without warning, then perception becomes less like a camera capturing truth and more like a screen displaying versions. And if you catch one version slide into another, even for an instant, you're left wondering who or what decides which version you're allowed to see. Philosophers might argue this is a small glimpse of how constructed reality really is. Just as our brains adjust sound, temperature, and balance to keep experience stable, perhaps light is another lever constantly being tuned behind the curtain. Most of the time, we don't notice. But when we do, when the slider becomes visible, it's as though we've stumbled on the editing booth of existence. A reminder that reality is less objective than we like to believe. It is curated, moderated, filtered through layers we can't control. The psychological effect lingers long after the distortion passes. You walk away from the window unsettled, carrying a quiet suspicion. If reality can shift like that without notice, what else is being adjusted that I never see? Are my emotions tied to these hidden sliders? Are my memories colored by filters I can't detect? How much of life is raw truth, and how much is just glare, settings manipulated so seamlessly, I mistake them for permanence? The window glare. Distortion is minor, almost laughable if dismissed as optics. But if you linger on it, if you let yourself feel the uncanny weight of it, it becomes a profound metaphor. Reality may not be the fixed, solid stage we assume. It may be a screen, and sometimes, through reflections of glass, you glimpse the hands that hold the sliders, and once you've seen it, you can never truly trust the brightness of the world again. Every glance through glass, every sudden tilt of light, whispers the same unsettling truth. Reality is adjustable, and you're not the one adjusting it. The thought preceding event. You're lost in thought, the kind that floats aimlessly through your mind. A face flickers into memory, a word rises for no reason. An image forms as if from nowhere. And then, seconds later, it arrives. Not in your imagination, but in reality. The face you pictured calls your phone. The word you thought appears on the television. The image you held without cause manifests right in front of you. It doesn't feel like chance. It feels like foresight, as if your mind had stepped half a second ahead of time and returned with a fragment of the future. This is the thought preceding event, an experience so common, yet so unnerving, that it leaves you wondering whether your brain is only observing reality or somehow anticipating it. At first, you dismiss it as coincidence. After all, the world is full of patterns, and your brain is a factory of random thoughts. But the timing is too sharp to ignore. You think of rain, and then it begins to fall. You hum a song, and then it plays in the cafe. You imagine an accident, and moments later, you hear the screech of tires outside. The sensation it leaves behind is not neutral, it's charged. A shiver in the spine, a whisper of "how could I have known?" The event feels less like chance and more like the fulfillment of something you already saw. Psychologists explain this through selective attention and pattern recognition. Your brain thinks thousands of thoughts each day. Most fade, unremarked. But when one aligns with reality, your mind seizes it, spotlighting the synchronicity. It feels supernatural because you remember the hits and forget the misses. Yet, Even knowing this, the emotional weight lingers. The timing is too intimate, too uncanny, too tailored. It feels less like randomness and more like your consciousness brushed against the threads of time. Cultures throughout history have given this phenomenon sacred weight. Ancient Greeks spoke of oracles who glimpsed fragments of what was to come, often in flashes of thought or dream. Many indigenous traditions interpret sudden anticipatory thoughts as intuition, an inner knowing that precedes the event. Even in modern psychology, researchers explore presentiment, the possibility that the human body responds to stimuli seconds before it occurs. Heart rates shifting, brain waves altering, as if the body senses the future just before the conscious mind does. Real-life accounts make it even harder to dismiss. People report dreaming of someone they haven't seen in years, only for that person to reappear the next day. Others think suddenly of a distant friend, only to receive a message minutes later. Some even recount picturing accidents moments before they unfold, unable to explain why the thought arrived. Science chalks this up to probability, memory, and coincidence. But the people who feel it, know it, carries a taste of something more, an unsettling brush with precognition. The deeper unease lies in what this suggests about time itself. We like to think of the future as sealed, unknown until it becomes present. But the thought preceding event hints at a thinner boundary. Perhaps reality radiates forward and backward, threads of the future tugging faintly at our awareness before they unfold. Perhaps time is not a straight arrow but a field, and our minds occasionally drift into its edges, plucking a moment before it arrives. Or maybe consciousness is not bound by now at all. It leaks, flickers, moves slightly ahead, glimpsing echoes of events before they anchor into the present. Imagine life as a film reel. Most of the time, your awareness rides the current frame, but every so often, your mind flicks one frame forward. You see an image before the projector catches up. Then, when reality delivers it, the sense of déjà vu strikes like lightning. You knew it, you felt it, you saw it seconds before. And it makes you question, if you can step ahead one frame, why not two? Why not more? The thought preceding event unsettles precisely because it feels both ordinary and impossible. Everyone has felt it, yet no one can fully explain it. Science reassures us with probabilities, while experience whispers of something stranger. And in those moments, when thought and event align with impossible precision, we are left with a haunting possibility that maybe the future is not waiting to be written. Maybe it's already here, brushing against us in fragments, letting us taste its presence before it fully arrives. The lost familiar scent. You're sitting in your room, walking down a street, maybe even riding in a car when it happens. A scent arrives out of nowhere, sharp, vivid, unmistakable. Perfume you know too well, the smoke of a fire long gone, the earthy smell of soil after rain. For a second, it is so real you almost expect to see the source. But there is nothing. No perfume bottle, no cigarette, no open window or storm, just air, empty and ordinary, holding a fragrance that shouldn't exist. This is the lost familiar scent, a phenomenon that feels less like imagination and more like memory leaking into the present. Smell is the most primal of senses. Unlike sight or sound, which are filtered heavily through interpretation, scent bypasses much of the conscious brain and goes straight to the limbic system, the seat of memory and emotion. That is why a single whiff can resurrect entire moments of your past. A childhood bedroom, a loved one's embrace, a place you haven't visited in decades. But when that scent arrives with no physical trigger, the effect is destabilizing. It's as if time itself has folded and spilled into your lungs. Psychologists sometimes call this phantom olfaction, often dismissing it as misfiring neurons. The brain, they argue, can recreate smells much like it does images or sounds in dreams. But these explanations rarely satisfy those who experience it. Because when the lost familiar scent arrives, it feels too precise, too sharp, too perfectly timed to be dismissed as random brain static. And what makes it more haunting is the way it so often connects directly to memory, sometimes stirring feelings so powerful you are left shaken long after the air has cleared. Consider the stories of those who swear these scents are not random at all. A woman cleaning her house suddenly smells her late grandmother's perfume, the same floral note that once lingered in hugs and Sunday visits. The scent lasts only seconds, yet she is overwhelmed with the sense her grandmother is near. A man hiking alone smells the acrid smoke of a campfire, so vivid he turns in circles looking for its source, only to realize there is no fire, no campers, no smoke at all. Others describe the smell of wet soil indoors, ocean salt miles from the coast, or candle wax in rooms with no candles. These accounts span cultures and eras, suggesting that the lost familiar scent is as old as memory itself. Folklore often frames it as visitation. Many traditions hold that spirits announce themselves through fragrance, flowers for the benevolent, sulfur or smoke for the restless. In grief, people frequently report smelling the signature scent of the deceased, a phenomenon so common it is recorded across centuries. Whether it is the brain producing comfort or something truly other reaching across the veil, the effect is the same. The presence feels real. For a moment, the dead walk with us again, carried not by sight or sound, but by the invisible language of smell. Science has also explored stranger possibilities. Some researchers studying epilepsy have found that seizures can trigger sudden, inexplicable scents. Burning rubber, perfume, even metallic tangs of blood, experienced as completely real though no source exists. Others suggest the brain may be detecting microparticles or environmental cues too subtle for us to consciously register, and then amplifying them into a full sensory event. But even these explanations leave gaps. Why do so many lost scents arrive with emotional precision? Why do they so often connect to memory, grief, or pivotal moments? The psychological weight of the lost familiar scent is immense. It doesn't just feel like a hallucination. It feels like a message. When you smell a perfume tied to someone you loved, it feels like their memory has reached out to you. When you smell fire or smoke with no source, it feels like a warning. When you smell soil, ocean, or rain where none exists, it feels like the earth itself reminding you of its presence. It doesn't feel like coincidence. It feels orchestrated, personal, designed to stir something within you. And perhaps that is the most unsettling truth of this glitch. That scent is the sense least bound by time. Unlike a photograph or a sound recording, smells are rarely preserved. They exist only in the moment, then vanish. To encounter one again without a source is to touch something impossible, a piece of the past resurrected, or a signal from a reality brushing against your own. It forces you to question whether memory is contained only in your mind, or whether the air itself remembers, releasing fragments when you least expect it. The lost familiar scent is haunting not because it is dramatic, but because it is intimate. It bypasses logic and goes straight to your core, reviving people, places, and times you thought were gone forever. And when it leaves, you are left with silence, emptiness, and a question that refuses to fade. Was that my mind? Or was someone really here? Because once you've breathed in a fragrance with no source, you know you've inhaled more than air. You've inhaled mystery itself. And it lingers, not in the room, but in you, reminding you that reality is less solid, less contained, and far stranger than we dare to admit. The duplicate phrase moment. You're sitting in silence, mind wandering, and a phrase passes through your thoughts. It's ordinary, maybe even trivial. I should grab some water, or that makes no sense. It feels private, sealed inside your head where no one else can hear it. But then, a second later, the person beside you says the exact words. Not similar, not a loose paraphrase. Word for word, identical. In that instant, your inner dialogue and external reality collide, and you can't tell which came first, the thought or the voice. This is the duplicate phrase moment, the eerie overlap where the borders of the mind dissolve. It happens in conversations, in classrooms, in cars. You think of a phrase and someone else speaks it, perfectly aligned, like they reached inside your head and pulled it out. You freeze, a nervous laugh escaping, maybe a startled, "I was just about to say that," but the deeper unease lingers. How could your thought leap from your mind into another's mouth so seamlessly? Coincidence feels too fragile an explanation. Psychologists sometimes reduce it to pattern recognition. Humans often think in cliches, stock phrases, predictable expressions. If the situation calls for "that's unbelievable" or "I can't believe this," it's not shocking if two people land on it at once. But the duplicate phrase moment resists that simplicity. It's not just common expressions, it's the timing. It's the uncanny exactness. The words arrive in your head, and then, like an echo out of sync, they appear outside of you. Take the story of a man on a long train ride, staring out the window. he thought without speaking. This feels like the edge of the world. A poetic, private observation. 2 seats away, a stranger looked up from a book and murmured aloud, "This feels like the edge of the world." The man's blood ran cold. It wasn't a cliché. It wasn't likely. It was his private thought, stolen by reality, or the woman in a meeting, exhausted, thinking to herself, "We're going in circles." Seconds later, her colleague interrupted the discussion with the exact same phrase. "We're going in circles." She almost dropped her pen. She wasn't shocked by his observation, but by the feeling that the thought wasn't hers anymore. It no longer belonged to her private inner voice. It belonged to the room. Moments like this stir questions about where thoughts truly reside. Are they sealed inside individual minds, or do they float in some shared field of consciousness picked up like radio signals by anyone tuned the same way? Jung called it the collective unconscious. Some physicists speculate about entanglement of minds, but even without theories, the experience itself is unsettling. It feels as though your boundaries are porous, that your thoughts aren't entirely yours. There is another layer of strangeness. Sometimes, when the phrase is spoken aloud after you've thought it, your brain stumbles. For a split second, you're not sure whether you thought it first or heard it first. The order blurs, the timeline collapses, and reality feels less like a sequence and more like a loop. The thought doesn't feel internal anymore. It feels external, as if you overheard your own mind from outside your body. And once it happens, you can't unsee the possibility. How many of your thoughts are original, and how many are echoes? How many sentences you think are yours were really seeded by words around you, absorbed before you noticed? The duplicate phrase moment is terrifying because it suggests there may be no hard line between thought and speech, between the private self and the collective voice of reality. Some dismiss it as coincidence. Others whisper that it is proof the world is a simulation. Small glitches revealing that thought and sound are drawn from the same script. Whether coincidence or crack in the system, the effect is the same. You're left rattled, staring at the person who spoke your words, wondering if they noticed the overlap too, or if the strangeness lives only in you. The duplicate phrase moment doesn't shout. It unsettles quietly in the space between thought and speech, private and shared, and the question it leaves behind is haunting. If your thoughts can appear in another's mouth, how much of your inner life is truly yours? And if reality can mirror the mind so precisely, who or what is holding the script? The tilted time sensation. You sit in silence, staring at nothing in particular, and suddenly the world bends. Minutes feel stretched, swollen, endless. Or they collapse in on themselves, vanishing before you even register them. You check the clock and find it unmoved, its hands stubborn in their stillness. Yet, your body insists hours have passed, or seconds have disappeared. This is the tilted time sensation, the unsettling fracture where your inner sense of time and the world's measurement of it no longer agree. It begins quietly, often in the mundane. You drift into thought, blink, and what feels like hours is revealed as 5 minutes. Or you wait for someone, convinced only a short time has passed, only to realize you've been sitting for nearly an hour. At first, you laugh it off, calling it boredom, calling it daydreaming. But the more it happens, the stranger it feels, because the clock is supposed to be the anchor. It is the world's way of keeping you tethered. And yet, in these moments, the anchor slips, and time bends to your perception instead. Science offers explanations. Neurologists say time is constructed in the brain, stitched together by rhythms of attention, emotion, and memory. When adrenaline spikes, seconds expand, stretching like elastic bands, your body recording each detail as if to prepare for survival. When boredom dulls your senses, time contracts, slipping by unnoticed until the clock reminds you of its passing. But no matter how rational the explanation, the experience feels more profound. Because in those moments, it's not just perception that shifts, it's reality itself as you live it. Think about the times you felt it most vividly. The car accident where everything slowed into unbearable detail. Glass falling in slow motion, each thought a lifetime between impacts. The joyful conversation that seemed to end in seconds, though hours had passed. The restless night where minutes dragged like centuries. The eerie wait where time collapsed, leaving you dizzy, unsure of what had just vanished. These moments are universal, and yet they never stop feeling uncanny. They reveal that time is not the solid river we believe it to be, It is an unstable mirror, reflecting differently depending on where we stand. History and myth echo this truth. Ancient travelers told of enchanted groves, where a night of feasting equaled 100 years outside. Mystics spoke of losing themselves in meditation, returning hours later when only minutes had passed. Even modern accounts of near-death experiences describe time unraveling, stretching, folding, flickering in ways clocks could never capture. The tilted time sensation is not new. It has haunted humanity as long as we have watched the hands of a clock and noticed they do not match the ticking of our souls. The danger lies not in the shift itself, but in what it suggests, that time is not absolute, but relational. That what we call an hour is not one thing, but two, the number on the clock and the way it is lived in the mind. And when those two drift apart, you begin to question which one is real. If the clock says one thing and your body says another, who decides the truth? Is time what we measure or what we feel? Examples linger in every life. A student in an exam hall looks up, shocked to find an hour gone when it felt like 10 minutes. A patient in a hospital stares at the ceiling, minutes dragging into eternities. A lover lies beside another, hours collapsing into seconds, as if time itself bent to preserve the moment. Each instance reminds us, time is not a single steady current, but a field that tilts and warps under the weight of attention, emotion, and memory. But there's something even more haunting. Sometimes the tilted time sensation is so strong, it feels like you've slipped outside the normal flow entirely, as though you've stepped into a pocket of existence where time has been edited, rewritten, or erased. You emerge with a jolt, staring at the unmoved clock, feeling as though you've been stolen from yourself. And the silence of that moment asks a terrifying question. What if time itself is not fixed, but fragile? What if the clocks are only one version, and our inner lives brush against another? Yet hidden within the unease is a strange beauty. The tilted time sensation reminds us that life is not lived in hours or minutes, but in perception. That a single second of terror can mark us forever, while a year of monotony can fade into nothing. That time is not equal for all experiences, but elastic, shaped by the intensity of our presence within it. And perhaps that means the truest measure of time is not the clock, but the depth with which we live each moment. So the next time you feel minutes drag like centuries or hours vanish like seconds, pause. Notice the tilt. Notice how reality feels stretched or collapsed around you, because in that flicker, you are glimpsing the fragility of the thing we trust most, the ticking of time. Maybe the clock is right. Maybe your body is right. Or maybe both are illusions, two faces of a truth too vast to grasp. Either way, the tilt leaves its mark. And once you've felt it, you'll never again believe that time is steady. You'll always know that under its surface, time flickers. It bends, it tilts, and sometimes it breaks. The inverted reflection glitch. You lean toward the mirror, expecting the perfect synchronization you've trusted your whole life. A smile should meet a smile. A blink should match a blink. The pact between you and your reflection has always been absolute. It copies instantly, without error. But then, something slips. You raise your hand, and the reflection seems a fraction too slow. You tilt your head, and for the briefest moment, it feels like the angle doesn't quite match. Or maybe the expression on its face doesn't fully belong to you. The inverted reflection glitch doesn't scream. It whispers. A half-second delay, a reversed flicker, a mismatch so subtle that your mind struggles to decide if it even happened. Yet, once you see it, you cannot shake the sense that the reflection is playing by a different rule book. Mirrors are supposed to be loyal. They obey the physics of light without question, producing the comfort of predictability. This is why they ground us. They prove that reality responds to our presence. But the glitch is terrifying because it violates that law. Even a slight delay or reversal feels monumental. It is not just a visual hiccup. It is a betrayal. It suggests the reflection isn't merely a projection of you, but an entity with its own timing, its own intent. For a moment, you're not looking at yourself. You're looking at something wearing you. Science tries to soothe us. Maybe your brain's processing lagged. Maybe your peripheral vision misaligned. Maybe the light bounced in a way that tricked the eye. Psychologists might explain it as a cognitive slip, a moment when your predictive brain guessed what the reflection should do and was startled when it seemed late. But even knowing this, the dread remains. Because deep down, you didn't just see a lag. You felt another presence. You felt the mirror hesitate, as though it chose to respond instead of being forced. Examples of this glitch surface everywhere. People brushing their teeth swear their reflection's mouth moved a beat later. Someone blinking in exhaustion watches, horrified, as the mirrored eyes don't quite close in time. In the corner of your vision, the reflection may even appear to hold still when you move, catching up only when you look directly. The uncanny weight of these moments lingers because they strike at the very core of recognition. If the reflection is not bound to your rules, then what else is it bound to? Folklore has long warned of mirrors behaving wrongly. Legends of delayed doubles, of reflections revealing truths or spirits, of glass as a gateway rather than a surface. Ancient traditions cautioned against staring too long into mirrors in the dark, fearing the reflection might become independent. And the inverted reflection glitch feels like proof that these were never just superstitions, but instincts tuned to the possibility that the figure in the mirror has its own laws. The psychology is even more disturbing when you think about trust. You rely on mirrors not only to confirm your image, but to confirm the stability of reality itself. If reflections are untrustworthy, then reality itself becomes negotiable. You start to wonder, has it always been delayed? Has it always been off, but you were too distracted to notice? And if the reflection can break its rulebook, what prevents it from one day stepping entirely out of sync? The most chilling thought is this. What if the reflection is not behind at all, but ahead? What if its delay is only an illusion, and instead, it already knows what you will do? For that split second when it feels reversed, maybe the mirror isn't copying you, you're copying it. You become the reflection, and it becomes the original. That tiny misalignment plants a seed of doubt. Are you truly the one being mirrored, or are you the echo of something staring back? The inverted reflection glitch unsettles not because it's dramatic, but because it's subtle. It thrives in the half-second margins of perception, where certainty falters and imagination fills the gaps. It reminds you that even the most basic contracts of reality, the mirror reflecting you, are fragile, and when they falter, you glimpse the possibility of another rulebook entirely. And once you've caught it, once you've seen your reflection hesitate, smile too late, or blink a heartbeat off, you can never fully relax in front of glass again. Because now, every time you face yourself, you wonder, is it following my lead or waiting for me to follow its? The identity flicker glimpse. You reach out, and for a fraction of a second, something slips. Your eyes land on your own hand, your reflection in glass, the curve of your face in a mirror, and you don't recognize it. It's not horror, not exactly, but a flicker of alienation so sharp it makes your skin crawl. The hand looks like yours, but only because you've been told it is. The face seems familiar, but it could belong to a stranger. For that instant, you feel as though you are only borrowing a body, wearing it like a costume that doesn't quite fit. This is the identity flicker glimpse, a fragile moment when the seamless illusion of self breaks, and you stand outside yourself, unsure if you've ever truly been who you thought you were. What makes this so unsettling is its brevity. It doesn't last long enough to dissect, to explain away. It comes like static in a signal, a glitch between perception and ownership. You know logically that it is your hand, your face, your body, but knowing doesn't erase the strangeness of not feeling it in that instant. You catch the uncanny dissonance before your mind rushes in to repair the illusion, to remind you, this is you. The gap between familiarity and estrangement is only a breath wide, but it's enough to make you question how fragile identity really is. Psychologists call this depersonalization, a brief disruption in the brain's sense of ownership over the body. For a moment, the machinery that keeps me bound to this body falters, and the two come apart. Most people experience it at least once, often in times of fatigue, stress, or sensory overload. It is your mind lagging, failing to immediately stitch perception to identity. Yet, to the person caught in it, it feels like revelation. Because when you fail to recognize yourself, even for a heartbeat, you glimpse the possibility that the self you take for granted may be nothing more than a trick your brain repeats to keep you whole. Think of it as catching a glimpse of the backstage. Most of the time, the performance of I runs flawlessly. Your body, your memories, your identity all aligned into a single actor on the stage of consciousness. But sometimes the lights flicker, and you see the scaffolding beneath. You realize the actor may not be the same as the stage. The self may not be as permanent, as stable as you've always believed. History and culture are filled with echoes of this phenomenon. Mystics describe moments of seeing themselves as separate from their bodies, as if they were inhabiting a vessel not truly theirs. Ancient shamans spoke of souls borrowing the flesh for a lifetime, with glimpses of disconnection viewed as sacred. Even modern neuroscience uncovers experiments where illusions, like the rubber hand trick, convince the brain to adopt false limbs as its own. If ownership of the body can be transferred so easily, then what does it mean when you fail to recognize your own? The identity flicker glimpse is brief, but its implications are vast. It suggests that the bond between body and self is not absolute but constructed. If it can falter for an instant, then what else about identity is unstable? Are you the body or the observer behind it? Are you the face in the mirror or the fleeting awareness questioning whether the face belongs to you at all? These questions are not philosophical indulgences. They are born in that sharp moment when you stare at your own hand and it feels like someone else's. The unease runs deeper because the glimpse feels like a glitch, not a dream. Dreams dissolve when you wake, but this happens while you are wide awake, immersed in the ordinary. It intrudes where you should feel most certain, your own body. And in doing so, it reminds you that certainty itself may be an illusion. Breaking free from the discomfort of this glimpse often means forcing familiarity back into place, moving your hand, touching your skin, blinking hard into your reflection until recognition returns. But the trace of the question remains. If you can lose the sense of ownership in a moment, how strong is it really? If your face can feel like a stranger's, then what anchors the word I at all? The identity flicker glimpse leaves you shaken because it does more than distort vision. It fractures the illusion of self. It's not just about failing to recognize your hand or face. It's about realizing that you may only ever be a flickering perception, stitched together moment by moment, vulnerable to unraveling with the slightest slip in the machinery. The conversation that loops. You're in the middle of an ordinary moment, a chat with a friend, a coworker, even a stranger in passing. The rhythm feels natural, the flow unremarkable. But then, something jolts your awareness. The words you're hearing are the same ones you just heard seconds ago. Not just similar, identical. The same tone, the same phrasing, the same timing, as though reality itself pressed rewind and replayed the scene. You're caught in what feels like a loop, a conversation déjà vu, so precise it unsettles you to the core. For an instant, it feels as though the world around you has skipped, like an old record, and you're the only one who noticed. This is the phenomenon some call the conversation that loops, a surreal fracture in normality, where human interaction seems to repeat itself exactly, leaving you questioning whether memory, time, or reality itself just glitched. It's not like ordinary déjà vu, which feels like a vague recognition of a moment. This is sharper, more mechanical, as if the dialogue itself has been copied and pasted into existence twice. And while most dismiss it quickly, those who experience it deeply can't shake the sense that they've brushed against the edges of something beyond explanation. Psychologists might explain it through the mechanics of memory misfires. Our brains process speech in fractions of a second, buffering meaning before it fully settles. A delay or hiccup in that process could trick you into believing you've heard the same exchange twice. Others suggest fatigue, stress, or neurological glitches that cause the brain to momentarily replay its own recordings, feeding you the same input again. Yet, these explanations rarely capture the uncanny precision people describe. The words aren't just similar, they're exact. The tone isn't just close, it's mirrored. The laughter, the pauses, even the small inflections seem carbon copied, as though the scene was duplicated wholesale. What makes this more unsettling is how many people report it in social settings. A woman once described asking her friend a casual question and hearing the identical response. Same chuckle, same words, just moments later. A man in an office recounted hearing his boss give instructions, then repeat them exactly in the same tone, with no acknowledgement that the words had already been spoken. Some have even reported entire exchanges, 2 or 3 lines of dialogue, repeating like a script being run again. And each time, the sense is not just eerie, but wrong, as if reality's flow was briefly corrupted. Across cultures, these loops have taken on stranger interpretations. In mystical traditions, repeating dialogue was sometimes seen as a sign of crossing into a liminal space, a place where reality folds and repeats itself, like echoes in a cavern of time. In simulation theory, such glitches are described as rendering errors, moments where the system stutters, accidentally replaying data it just processed. Some even suggest it could be evidence of timelines brushing against each other, parallel versions of the same moment, colliding and producing a repeat before splitting apart again. What deepens the disturbance is the way these moments make you question the solidity of interaction itself. A conversation is supposed to be alive, spontaneous, unfolding in real time. When it repeats perfectly, it feels less like human expression and more like a script. You can't help but wonder, are we living out lines already written? Is reality less dynamic than we believe, more of a staged production where even speech can be recycled? The emotional impact lingers long after the moment ends. You may try to laugh it off, but in the back of your mind, questions swirl. Did anyone else notice? Did the other person feel the loop, or was it only you? And if you're the only one aware, does that mean the glitch wasn't in them, but in you? These doubts gnaw at your sense of control, leaving you hyper-aware of every repeated phrase, every echo of words you thought you already heard. The conversation that loops cuts deep because it attacks the fabric of connection. Human speech is one of the anchors of reality, proof that we are alive, responsive, conscious beings. When that anchor falters, when words repeat with mechanical precision, you glimpse something terrifying, that even the most human of experiences might not be as organic as you thought. And the scariest part is this: you can never prove it happened. You can't replay it, can't capture it, can't hold it up to others as evidence. You are left alone with the memory, alone with the suspicion that for one breath of time, reality revealed its seams. And once you've noticed the loop, you'll never fully trust that the next sentence you hear is as new as it seems. Because when conversation repeats, perfectly and without cause, it isn't just words looping, it's reality itself whispering that the script can reset at any moment, and you may never know if you've been here before. The disappearing stranger trail. You're walking down a street, or maybe along a forest path, and you notice someone just ahead of you, a stranger. Ordinary enough to dismiss, a coat, a stride, the sound of footsteps that confirm you're not alone. You let your eyes drift, maybe distracted by your phone, maybe by the crunch of your own shoes. But when you look up again, they're gone. Not turned a corner, not slipped into a doorway. Gone without a trace. No fading sound of steps, no movement in the distance, no evidence they were ever there. This is the disappearing stranger trail, the unsettling glitch when someone ahead seems to step out of this dimension entirely. At first, you second-guess yourself. Maybe they moved faster than you realized. Maybe you blinked and missed the turn they took. But the air carries no echo of departure. The space ahead is empty, too empty. As if the path swallowed them whole. You stand still, scanning for movement, searching for proof you didn't imagine them. But the silence presses in, confirming the impossible absence. Consider the man who swore he followed footsteps across fresh snow. The prints stretched ahead of him, clear and sharp in the frozen ground. He kept walking, expecting to catch sight of the figure who made them. But halfway across the field, the tracks ended. No fading, no sign of turning back. Just a sudden stop, as though the person had been lifted straight out of existence. He stood in the icy wind, staring at the last footprint, and felt a terror deeper than any scream. The knowledge that someone had been there and now wasn't. Or the woman walking home at dusk, who saw a man with a backpack several paces ahead. She remembers the rhythm of his footsteps, the bob of his shoulders. She remembers looking away for seconds as a car passed, then looking back and finding the path ahead empty. There were no alleys, no driveways, no doors, just the empty stretch of sidewalk, and a silence that seemed to press closer than before. For weeks, she replayed the moment, searching for a rational detail she must have missed. But there was none. Psychologists would call this a failure of attention. They'd say you filled in a presence that wasn't there, that you imagined the continuity of footsteps when the mind stitched incomplete data into a story. But the disappearing stranger trail resists easy dismissal. Sometimes, others see it too. Two hikers following a lone figure both watch him vanish at a bend where no exit exists. A mother and daughter both hear the footsteps stop mid-stride on an empty road. When more than one witness confirms the absence, coincidence hardens into mystery. There are theories, of course. Some suggest it's a bleed-through, a moment when timelines overlap and a figure from elsewhere briefly enters your path before slipping back into their own. Others believe it's the simulation glitching, removing background characters when they're no longer needed. Still others see it as something more primal, a reminder that reality is not as sealed as we believe, that sometimes the fabric frays, and a person can simply fall through. What makes the disappearing stranger trail so unnerving is its ordinariness. These aren't glowing apparitions or monsters from legend. They're just people, an everyday silhouette, a mundane set of footsteps, vanishing as though they were never real. And that ordinariness makes it worse. Because if an ordinary stranger can vanish without trace, what does that mean for you? How stable is your place in this world? Really? The memory lingers. Long after, you find yourself glancing behind people you pass on the street, listening for footsteps when you shouldn't. Part of you wonders if, one day, someone will turn and realize you are the one who vanished, that the trail ends where you stood, leaving no sign of departure, only silence. And so, the question presses against your thoughts. Were they ever truly there? Or did you just catch a glimpse of a ghost, a timeline crossing, a character written out of the scene? Or worse, did reality remind you that disappearing is always an option, and permanence is only an illusion?